I never told my daughter what I actually kept inside the rusting warehouse in the city center. To her it was just an eyesore, a relic of my days as a dirty pipeline welder. When she married a man who looked at me with nothing but disdain, I made sure he would never find the key, but I underestimated his greed. While I was sitting in my kitchen enjoying a cup of black coffee, my phone buzzed with a silent alarm. I opened the camera feed and there he was, my son-in-law armed with bolt cutters trying to snap the heavy chains on my gate. He thought I was a senile old man who wouldn't notice. He was wrong. I had been waiting for this moment for months, and what I did next was not revenge. It was an education. I am Caleb Robinson, 73 years old, and if you are listening to this, you probably know what it feels like to be underestimated by people who have never worked a hard day in their lives. Before I tell you how I turned my son-in-law's greed into his worst nightmare, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments if you have ever had a family member who smiled to your face while sharpening a knife for your back. I read every single comment. Now let's go back to that morning. The steam from my coffee mug was the only thing moving in my kitchen. It was 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. I sat at my small oak table, the wood scarred and stained from 40 years of family dinners. My iPad was propped up against the sugar bowl. On the screen, the image was crisp and high definition, a stark contrast to the grainy security footage most people expect. I watched Gavin, my son-in-law, step out of his white Tesla Model S. He parked it right in the alleyway, blocking the dumpster as if he owned the entire block. He was wearing one of those slim-fit designer suits that looked like it would rip if he bent over too quickly. Even through the screen, I could see the sweat beading on his forehead. He wasn't built for this heat, and he certainly wasn't built for manual labor. Next to him stood a man I didn't recognize, a locksmith presumably, or maybe just a thug he hired off the internet. They were staring at the main gate of my warehouse. Gavin pointed a manicured finger at the heavy iron padlock. I took a sip of my coffee. It was bitter, just how I liked it. You see, Gavin thought that warehouse was full of rusted pipes and worthless scrap metal. Just last night he had sat at this very table eating the roast beef I paid for and lectured me about my assets. "Caleb, you really need to liquidate that property," he had said, swirling his red wine. "It is just sitting there gathering dust. Maya and I could use the proceeds to invest in my new crypto venture. It is embarrassing, honestly, a pile of junk in a gentrifying neighborhood." I had looked at Maya, my daughter, my beautiful, intelligent Maya, who was now staring at her plate, afraid to meet my eyes. She knew how much that place meant to me, or at least she knew it was where I spent my days. But she said nothing. She let him talk down to me. She let him call my life's work a pile of junk. That silence hurt more than Gavin's words ever could. I didn't argue with him last night. I learned a long time ago, when you are welding a high-pressure line 50 feet underwater, panic and anger get you killed. You stay calm, you assess the pressure, you wait. Back on the screen, Gavin was losing his patience. He grabbed a pair of massive orange bolt cutters from the trunk of his Tesla. I almost laughed. The boy had soft hands, hands that had never held anything heavier than a smartphone. He struggled to lift the cutters, his face turning a shade of red that matched the brick wall behind him. He clamped the jaws of the cutters onto the chain. He strained. He grunted. I could see his expensive leather shoes slipping on the gravel. The chain didn't budge. That chain was hardened alloy steel, the kind we used to secure heavy machinery on the rigs. He could gnaw on it with those cutters for 100 years, and he wouldn't make a dent. I tapped the screen, zooming in on his face. Frustration was morphing into rage. He kicked the gate. Then he turned to the locksmith and started shouting. I didn't have the audio on, but I could read his lips. He was screaming, "Do something, I am paying you." The locksmith shook his head and pulled out a drill. Now that was a problem. A drill could work eventually. I set my coffee mug down. I could have called the police right then. I could have called Maya and showed her what her husband was doing to her father's property. But the police would just give him a slap on the wrist, and Maya would probably make excuses for him. She would say he was stressed, that he was trying to help me manage my estate. No. Gavin needed a lesson that the law couldn't provide. He needed to understand that some doors are locked for a reason. Not to keep people out, but to keep the danger in. I opened a different app on my phone. It was a custom interface connected to the warehouse's internal security system. I had installed it myself 3 years ago. On the screen, a menu popped up with several options: silent alarm, floodlights, siren, and my personal favorite, perimeter defense mode. Gavin was now instructing the locksmith to drill directly into the lock core. They were close, maybe 2 minutes away from breaching the perimeter. I watched Gavin wipe his forehead with a silk handkerchief. He looked triumphant. He thought he was minutes away from finding my stash of cash. He thought all old black men from the South didn't trust banks and kept their life savings in shoeboxes. That was his prejudice, and today that prejudice was going to hurt. I selected perimeter defense mode. A secondary menu appeared. Deploy deterrent. Yes or no? I didn't hesitate. My thumb hovered over the yes button. Inside that warehouse wasn't just scrap metal, it was a collection worth millions. But right at the entrance in the small vestibule between the outer gate and the inner steel doors, I had installed a high-pressure suppression system. It was designed to stop fires, but with a slight modification I made last month, it was loaded with something else. Military-grade pepper powder, concentrated capsaicin, the kind they use for riot control. On the iPad, the locksmith's drill bit into the metal. The lock clicked. Gavin pumped his fist in the air. He pushed the gate open, eager, greedy, stepping into the dark vestibule like a pirate boarding a ship. I pressed yes. On the screen, 4 hidden nozzles in the vestibule ceiling erupted. It looked like an explosion of white smoke. Gavin froze. For a split second, he looked confused. Then the cloud engulfed him. He dropped the bolt cutters. His hands flew to his face. He staggered back, crashing into the open gate. Even without sound, the panic was visceral. He was clawing at his eyes, his mouth open in a silent scream. The locksmith, who had been a few feet behind him, got a whiff of the cloud and sprinted away down the alley, leaving his tools behind. But Gavin was trapped in the cloud of his own making. He fell to his knees, retching, crawling blindly toward his Tesla. I took another sip of my coffee. It was still warm. "Welcome to hell, son," I whispered to the empty kitchen. My phone rang. It was the security company calling to confirm the deployment. I let it ring. I wanted to watch Gavin struggle for just a few more seconds. He finally managed to pull himself into the driver's seat of his car, but he couldn't see to drive. He just sat there, the Tesla's hazards flashing, looking like a trapped rat. I knew this was just the beginning. Tonight he would come home with red eyes and a story about an allergy attack or a chemical leak. He would lie to Maya, and I would be sitting right there in my recliner reading the newspaper, waiting to ask him how his day was. The war had started, and he didn't even know who the general was yet. To understand the satisfaction I felt watching Gavin choke on pepper powder in that alleyway, you have to understand the humiliation he put me through 6 months ago. The memory of my daughter's wedding day still tastes like bile in the back of my throat. It was supposed to be the happiest day of Maya's life, but for me, it was the day I realized I had let a viper into my nest. The wedding was held at the Sterling Estate, a sprawling vineyard in Napa Valley that cost more for one evening than my father made in his entire lifetime. The air smelled of expensive perfume and old money. I was the one paying for it, of course. $85,000. I wrote the check with a heavy hand, not because I couldn't afford it, but because Gavin had looked me in the eye 3 months prior and swore on his mother's grave that he would reimburse me as soon as his latest tech merger finalized. He called it a liquidity issue. I called it a lie, but I didn't say that to Maya. I saw how she looked at him like he hung the moon in the stars, so I signed the check. I wanted her to have her fairy tale even if the prince was plastic. I remember standing near the open bar nursing a glass of bourbon that I didn't really want. I was wearing my best suit. It was a charcoal 3-piece I had bought in 1998 for my wife's funeral. It was wool sturdy and kept immaculately clean in a garment bag. Maybe the lapels were a little too wide for modern fashion, and maybe the cut wasn't slim fit like the boys were wearing today, but it was dignity stitched into fabric. It was the suit of a man who respected the occasion. Gavin was holding court near the chocolate fountain, surrounded by his groomsmen. They were all cut from the same cloth, young men with slicked back hair and teeth that were too white, laughing too loud at jokes that weren't funny. They looked like sharks in tuxedos. Gavin spotted me and waved me over. For a second, I thought he was going to thank me. I thought maybe, just maybe, he would show a shred of gratitude. He threw an arm around my shoulder. His grip was loose, clammy. He smelled of expensive cologne and arrogance. "Gentlemen," he announced, his voice booming enough to turn heads, "I want you to meet the man who made today possible. This is Caleb, my father-in-law." I stood taller, ready to shake hands. Gavin continued flashing that salesman's smile. "Caleb is the salt of the earth, a real blue-collar hero. He spent 40 years as a janitor cleaning up other people's messes so Maya could go to college. Oops, sorry, I meant a welder. Same difference, right? Working with your hands is working with your hands. The group erupted in laughter. It wasn't warm laughter. It was the kind of laughter that separates us from them. One of his friends, a tall guy with a gold watch that cost more than my truck, looked me up and down. He stared at my wide lapels and the slight fray on my cuff. Resilient, the friend said, swirling his drink. That is the word, right, resilient. Good for you, Pops. I felt the heat rise up my neck. I wasn't a janitor. Not that there is any shame in honest work, but I was a master pipeline welder. I had worked on high-pressure lines in the North Sea. I had submerged myself in hyperbaric chambers. I held certifications that these boys couldn't even pronounce. My hands were calloused because they had built the infrastructure that heated their penthouses. But to Gavin, I was just the help that came with the wife. I looked at Gavin. I wanted to correct him. I wanted to tell him that the check he cashed came from a man who retired a millionaire, not a pauper. But I saw Maya across the room. She was laughing, oblivious to the insult. If I caused a scene, I would ruin her day. So I swallowed the rage. It tasted like ash. I just fix things, Gavin. I said, my voice low and steady. That is all. I walked away, needing fresh air. I found a quiet bench in the garden away from the noise. I just wanted to sit for a moment and miss my wife, Beatrice. She would have known how to handle this. She would have cut Gavin down with a single look. But solitude wasn't on the menu that night. 10 minutes later, Gavin found me. He wasn't alone. He had a folder tucked under his arm and a glass of champagne in his hand. He sat next to me, invading my personal space. Enjoying the party, Caleb, he asked. Top shelf liquor. Nothing but the best for you. It is a nice party, Gavin, I said, staring at the rose bushes. Listen, he said, his tone shifting from fake jovial to fake serious. He leaned in close, lowering his voice. Maya and I were talking. We are worried about you. You are getting up there in age, and the tax laws are changing this year. The estate tax is going to be brutal on people in your bracket. Well, your situation. My situation, I asked, turning to look at him. You know, fixed income. Pension. It is complicated stuff. My financial advisor drafted something up. It is a standard family asset management agreement. Basically, it allows me to help you optimize your taxes. I can move your assets under my umbrella, shield them from the government, and manage the monthly bills for you. It saves you the headache of remembering due dates. He opened the folder. Inside was a thick document full of legal jargon. But I didn't need a law degree to understand the bold words at the top: power of attorney and asset transfer. He was trying to take control of everything. My house, my truck, and the warehouse. He thought he was taking over a few $1,000s in a savings account. He had no idea he was trying to hijack a fortune. I need you to sign this tonight, Caleb, he said, clicking a gold pen and shoving it into my hand. My notary is here at the party. We can get this done and secure your future before the cake is cut. It is for Maya, really. She worries about you forgetting things. He was using my daughter as a weapon. He was painting me as senile to get my signature. I looked at the pen, then I looked at him. If I refused, he would go to Maya and tell her I was being difficult, that I was paranoid. He would drive a wedge between us. But if I signed, well, that wasn't an option. So I decided to give him exactly what he wanted, a confused old man. I let my hand tremble. I squinted my eyes, blinking rapidly. I left my reading glasses in the truck, Gavin. I mumbled, my voice taking on a frail, shaky quality. The words are all blurry. Are you sure this is safe? I don't want to lose my pension. Trust me, Dad, he said. The word dad sounded foreign and slimy coming from his mouth. I am a businessman. I do this for a living. Just sign on the line. I took the pen. I held it awkwardly like a child learning to write. I pressed the tip to the paper. Gavin was practically vibrating with excitement. He was watching the tip of that pen like a hawk watching a field mouse. I started to write, but I didn't write Caleb Robinson. I let my hand shake violently, the pen skidding across the paper. I scribbled a looping, illegible mess that looked vaguely like C. Robertson. It wasn't my legal signature. It wasn't even my name. In the eyes of the law, that document was garbage. There, I said, dropping the pen. Is that okay? My arthritis is acting up. Gavin snatched the paper away before the ink was even dry. He didn't check it closely. He was too greedy, too eager to claim his prize. He saw ink on the line, and that was enough for him. Perfect, Caleb. Just perfect, he said, standing up and buttoning his jacket. You did the right thing. You won't have to worry about a single bill ever again." He patted me on the shoulder again, a dismissive tap like you would pet a stray dog you just fed. I watched him walk back toward the reception tent. He made a beeline for Maya. I stood up and followed, staying in the shadows of the trellis. I needed to hear it. I needed to confirm my suspicion. Gavin wrapped his arms around Maya's waist and kissed her cheek. I saw him lean into her ear. The music had dipped for a moment, and his voice carried in the night air. "It is done, babe," he whispered, unaware that the old janitor was listening. He signed it. "Your dad is more senile than we thought." He didn't even read it. "We need to start moving the accounts tomorrow. We have to control his finances before he drinks it all away or gives it to some scammer. The house is ours." Maya looked concerned, but she nodded. "Okay, Gavin, if you think it is best." That nod broke my heart more than the debt. My daughter, the girl I raised to be strong and independent, was being manipulated by a man who saw her father as nothing more than a resource to be mined. I walked back to my truck. I didn't stay for the cake. I didn't stay for the speeches. I drove home in silence, the image of Gavin's smug face burned into my retinas. He thought he had won. He thought he had trapped a helpless old man. He didn't know that he had just declared war on a man who used to weld underwater while holding his breath for 3 minutes. I drove past the warehouse that night. I stopped and looked at the rusty gates. I thought about the treasures inside, the millions of dollars in vintage machinery and restored classics that Gavin was desperate to get his hands on. He wanted to manage my assets. Fine, I would let him try. I would let him dig his own grave shovelful by shovelful, and when he was deep enough, I would be the one to kick the ladder away. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in my kitchen and started planning. The wedding was over. The game had begun. My house used to be a sanctuary. It was a place of silent smelling of lemon oil and old books, a place where the ghost of my wife Beatrice and I could coexist in peace. But 3 weeks after the wedding, that peace was shattered not by a burglar, but by a U-Haul truck backing into my driveway. Gavin and Maya stood on my porch with 12 suitcases and a potted plant that was already half dead. They spun a tragic tale. Gavin said his condo was being renovated for toxic mold. He said it was unsafe for Maya's delicate lungs. He said they needed a place to crash for a few weeks just until the contractors finished. He said they wanted to be close to me to look after me to make sure I wasn't lonely. I knew it was a lie before he even finished the first sentence. I still have friends in the city. I knew the bank had foreclosed on his bachelor pad 2 days prior. I knew his credit cards were maxed out. But I looked at Maya, my little girl, standing there with dark circles under her eyes, looking ashamed and desperate. She didn't say a word. She just gripped the handle of her suitcase until her knuckles turned white. I couldn't turn her away. I couldn't let her sleep in her car. So against every instinct screaming in my gut, I opened the door. I thought I was being a good father. In reality, I was letting the fox into the henhouse. The invasion was swift and total. Within 48 hours, my home was no longer mine. The smell of lemon oil was replaced by Gavin's overpowering musk cologne and the stale scent of vape smoke. My quiet evenings were destroyed by his constant loud phone calls where he shouted buzzwords like synergy and blockchain to people who I suspected were just voicemail inboxes. But the real declaration of war happened on a Tuesday. I had gone to the grocery store to buy food because suddenly I was feeding 3 mouths on a pension budget. When I came back, I heard a low, constant humming sound coming from down the hall. It sounded like a swarm of angry bees. I followed the noise to my study. That room was my holy ground. It was where I kept my drafting table, my welding certifications, and most importantly, my record collection. Beatrice and I had spent 40 years collecting original jazz vinyls. Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Thelonious Monk. We had first editions that were worth more than Gavin's car. We used to sit in that room on Sunday evenings sipping tea, listening to the crackle and pop of the needle hitting the groove. I pushed the door open and dropped my grocery bags. The room was unrecognizable. My drafting table was shoved into a corner piled high with dirty laundry. The heavy velvet curtains were drawn tight, making the room pitch black except for the blinking red and blue lights of 3 massive computer towers that were roaring on my desk. The heat hit me instantly. It was 90 degrees in there. Gavin was sitting in my leather armchair, my chair wearing nothing but his boxers and a headset. He didn't even look up when I walked in. I scanned the room, panic rising in my chest. Where were the shelves? Where were the records? Then I saw them. In the hallway by the back door there were 3 black garbage bags. The jagged edge of a cardboard sleeve was poking out of one. I rushed over and ripped the bag open. There they were. My life's soundtrack, Beatrice's favorites. Tossed together like kitchen trash sleeves, bent vinyls scratching against each other without their protective covers. My hands shook as I pulled out a copy of Kind of Blue. The cover was creased right down the middle. I walked back into the study. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I reached down and yanked the power cord of the main computer tower out of the wall. The roaring silence that followed was deafening. Gavin spun around, ripping his headset off. "What the hell, Caleb? I was in the middle of a mining hash. You just cost me $50 in potential Ethereum. You threw away my records," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "You threw away Beatrice's records." "Oh, those dusty old things," Gavin waved a dismissive hand. "I needed the shelf space for the cooling units. These rigs run hot. Besides, I did you a favor. Vinyl is obsolete. It is all scratches and hiss. I can set you up with a Spotify account if you really want to listen to that elevator music." Elevator music. He called the soul of Black America elevator music. I stepped closer to him. The air in the room was suffocating. "Get your machines out of my study, now." Gavin stood up. He was taller than me, younger, but he had no center of gravity. He looked down at me with a mixture of pity and annoyance. "Look, Caleb, be reasonable. This isn't just a hobby. This is the future of finance. I am mining currency that is going to pay for your nursing home one day. You should be thanking me. I am utilizing dead space in this house to generate value. Those records were just collecting dust. I am generating wealth." He tried to step past me, but I didn't move. I am a 73-year-old man, but I spent 30 years wrestling steel pipes on oil rigs. I am made of density and leverage. He bumped into me and bounced off like he had hit a brick wall. "Put the records back," I said, "or I will throw these machines out the window. And I don't care if they are mining gold or diamonds." Gavin scoffed, but he saw something in my eyes that made him back down. He muttered something about me being a Luddite and started unplugging the other machines. But the damage was done. The sanctuary was violated. That night at dinner, the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Maya tried to make conversation about the weather, her eyes darting between me and her husband. She looked exhausted. I wanted to tell her to leave him. I wanted to tell her that a man who disrespects your father's memories will eventually disrespect you. But I knew she wasn't ready to hear it. Gavin pushed his peas around his plate. He hadn't apologized. Instead, he had pivoted. He was a predator looking for a new angle. "So, babe," he said to Maya, ignoring me completely, "I was thinking about your painting." Maya looked up surprised. "My painting I haven't painted in years, Gavin?" "Exactly," he said, leaning forward. "And that is a tragedy. You are talented. You need space to create. You can't be cramped up in that guest bedroom. You need a studio, a real artist's loft." He turned his head slowly and looked at me. His eyes were cold, calculating. "Your dad has that massive warehouse downtown. It is just sitting there rotting away. It is full of junk. Imagine if we cleared it out. We could put in skylights, hardwood floors. It could be the Maya Robinson Gallery." I stopped chewing. I saw what he was doing. He was using Maya's abandoned dreams as a crowbar to pry open my lock. Maya's face lit up for a second. That would be amazing. But Dad uses it for storage." "Storage for what?" Gavin laughed. "Scrap metal, old rusted parts." "Babe, it is a hazard. We would be doing him a favor by cleaning it out. We could increase the property value by 500%. He looked at me, smiling that shark smile. "What do you say, Caleb? Hand over the keys. Let me and a crew go in there this weekend. We will haul all that trash to the dump, power wash the floors, and give your daughter the studio she deserves. Don't you want her to be happy?" It was a perfect trap. If I said no, I was the selfish old man denying his daughter her dream. If I said yes, he would find the cars. He would find the restored engines. He would find the millions. I placed my fork down gently. "No," I said. The smile vanished from Gavin's face. "Excuse me, I said no. That warehouse stays as it is. It is not full of junk. It is full of my history, and it is where I keep Beatrice's things that didn't fit in this house." "Beatrice is dead, Caleb," Gavin snapped. The mask of politeness slipped completely. "She doesn't need a warehouse. Maya is alive. She is right here. You would choose a dead woman's junk over your living daughter's happiness. I looked at Maya. I saw the hurt in her eyes. She didn't understand. She thought I was just being stubborn. It is not about that, Maya, I said softly. Some things aren't meant to be touched. Gavin threw his napkin on the table. Unbelievable. This is exactly what I am talking about. You are hoarding. It is a sickness. You are sitting on prime real estate and letting it rot because you are too stubborn to let the new generation take over. He stood up, grabbing his wine glass. Come on, Maya. Let's go to the room. I can't digest my food in this negative energy. Maya hesitated, looking at me. I am sorry, Dad, she whispered. Then she got up and followed him. I sat there alone at the table. I listened to their footsteps going up the stairs. But they didn't go all the way up. They stopped on the landing. Gavin must have thought he was out of earshot. Or maybe he just didn't care. I heard his voice, hissing and venomous. He is lying, Maya. I know his type. What do you mean, Maya asked. My dad told me about this, Gavin said. He wasn't whispering anymore. He was seething. Old black guys like him, they don't trust banks. They don't trust the system. They hide their cash. I bet you anything that warehouse is full of cash stuffed into mattresses or coffee cans. That is why he won't let us in. He is sitting on a pile of untaxed money while we are drowning in debt. It is selfish. It is primitive. And I am not going to let him get away with it. I gripped the edge of the table so hard the wood creaked. Primitive. He didn't just want my money. He despised my existence. He saw me as a caricature, a stereotype from a bad movie. He thought my refusal was born of ignorance, not protection. He thought I was hiding crumbs, unaware that I was guarding the whole bakery. I stood up and carried my plate to the sink. I washed it, dried it, and put it away. I moved slowly, deliberately. You want to see what is in the warehouse, Gavin, I thought to myself. You want to see what a primitive old man can build. Fine, I will show you. But you are not going to like the price of admission. I went to the hallway and retrieved the copy of Kind of Blue from the trash. I wiped a smudge of dirt from the cover. I walked into the living room, sat in my chair, and waited for the house to go quiet. I knew he wouldn't stop. I knew tonight was just the opening negotiation. He would come for the keys again. And when asking didn't work, he would try taking. Let him try. I had faced storms on the ocean that would break a man like Gavin in half. A little wind from a greedy boy wasn't going to blow my house down. It was only going to fan the fire. Control is a funny thing. You never realize how much of it you have surrendered until you reach for a handle and find it locked. 3 days after I refused to hand over the warehouse keys, the temperature in my house dropped to absolute zero. Gavin stopped speaking to me. He would just walk past me in the hallway, his eyes fixed on his phone, radiating a smug confidence that set my teeth on edge. Maya, on the other hand, wouldn't look me in the eye. She was nervous, jumpy, like a cat in a room full of rocking chairs. I found out why on a Thursday morning. I had driven my truck down to the local pharmacy. It was a routine trip. I needed a refill on my blood pressure medication, lisinopril. It is a small pill that keeps my heart from exploding, a condition that living with Gavin was actively worsening. I stood in line behind a woman buying diapers, humming a jazz tune under my breath, feeling the weight of the years in my knees. When it was my turn, I greeted Brenda, the cashier. She has known me for 10 years. She knows about Beatrice's passing. She knows I like my receipts in the bag, not in my hand. I slid my debit card into the machine. It was a standard checking account card, the one I used for groceries and gas. The screen processed for a second, then beeped. A harsh electronic rejection. Declined. I frowned and wiped the chip on my flannel shirt. Grease and oil can mess up the sensors, a habit from the old days. I inserted it again. Beep, declined. Please contact your financial institution. Brenda looked at me, her face softening into that pitying expression I was starting to despise. Mr. Robinson, maybe there is a system error. Do you have another card? I didn't. Not on me. My black card, the one linked to the trust, was locked in the safe at the warehouse. I only carried this one to keep up the appearance of a pensioner living on a fixed income. I pulled out my phone to check the banking app. Access denied. User suspended. My blood ran cold, then hot. I didn't need to be a detective to figure this out. This was Gavin. He had gotten into Maya's head. He had convinced her that I was incompetent, that I was vulnerable to scams, that I needed to be protected from myself. They had frozen me out of my own money. There was a line forming behind me. People were shuffling their feet. I could feel their eyes on my back. Look at the poor old man, they were thinking. Probably forgot to pay his bills. Probably confused. I didn't call Maya. I didn't give them the satisfaction of hearing panic in my voice. Gavin was probably sitting by the phone right now waiting for me to beg. He wanted me to feel helpless. He wanted me to realize that without him, I couldn't even buy a pill to save my life. He forgot who I was. I looked at Brenda. "Give me a second, darling," I said calmly. I rolled up the left sleeve of my flannel shirt. Tucked deep inside the cuff, held tight against my forearm by a thick rubber band, was a roll of cash. It is an old habit from working the pipelines in the 70s. You never knew when a job would go south or when you would get stranded in a town that didn't take kindly to strangers. You always kept a get-home fund on your body. I pulled out the roll. It was $500 in 20s. Brenda's eyes widened slightly. I peeled off 2 bills and handed them to her. "Keep the change, Brenda. Buy yourself a coffee." I walked out of that pharmacy with my head high and my medicine in my pocket, but inside, I was at war. I sat in the cab of my truck, the engine idling. I didn't drive home immediately. I pulled out a burner phone from the glove box, another habit from a life lived cautiously, and dialed a number I knew by heart. Rachel picked up on the first ring. Rachel Gold is a shark in a Chanel suit. She has been managing my investments since the 90s. She is the only person on earth who knows exactly how many zeros are in my net worth. "It is happening, Rachel," I said. "They cut you off?" she asked. Her voice was sharp, efficient. "Blocked the checking account, suspended online access. They are trying to strangle me, Rachel. They think if they cut off the flow, I will dry up and blow away. Or better yet, I will come crawling to them for an allowance." "Do you want me to rain hellfire?" Rachel asked. "I can have a court order on their doorstep in an hour. I can freeze their assets. I can have Gavin investigated for elder abuse and financial fraud before lunch." I watched a pigeon pecking at a discarded wrapper on the sidewalk. It would be so easy. I could end this right now. I could crush Gavin like a bug. "No," I said. "Not yet," Caleb Rachel warned. "This is dangerous. If they have power of attorney—" "The document he has is fake," I interrupted. "Signed by C. Robertson. Remember, it is worthless paper. But he doesn't know that. Let him think he has won. Let him think he has his boot on my neck." "What is the play, Caleb? Plan B," I said. "Transfer the liquid assets from the secondary accounts into the offshore holding. Leave the main checking account empty. Let him see a balance of 0. Let him think he drained it or that I spent it all. Make him think I am broke, Rachel. Destitute. You want to play the poor relation. I want to see how he treats me when he thinks I have nothing left to offer," I said. "A man's true character comes out when he thinks he is looking down at you. I want Maya to see it too." "It is risky," she said. "So is underwater welding," I replied. "Do it. And Rachel, start the background check on his previous business partners. I want to know who else he has scammed. Consider it done. Stay safe, Caleb." I hung up and destroyed the SIM card. I drove home rehearsing my lines. I had to be an actor now. I had to be the confused, frightened old man Gavin wanted me to be. When I walked into the house, Gavin and Maya were in the kitchen. They were eating sushi takeout, expensive sushi, probably paid for with the last of the money they had drained from my account before blocking it. Maya looked up, guilt written all over her face. "Dad, you are back." I dropped my keys on the counter with a clatter. I let my shoulders slump. I made my hands shake as I reached for a glass of water. "My card didn't work," I said, my voice trembling. I was at the pharmacy. There were people watching. It was humiliated. "Maya, what is going on? Did the bank make a mistake?" Maya opened her mouth, but Gavin cut her off. He didn't even put down his chopsticks. "It wasn't a mistake, Caleb. We secured the account." "Secured it?" I asked, widening my eyes. "We noticed some suspicious activity," Gavin lied smoothly. "Weird transactions. We think you were being targeted by scammers. You know those internet predators who go after seniors. So I had the bank freeze it. For your own protection. My protection." I looked at Maya. "Honey, I need my medicine. I need gas for the truck. How am I supposed to live?" Maya looked at Gavin. "Maybe we should give him access to a small amount, Gavin. Just for emergencies." Gavin sighed as if dealing with a petulant child. He wiped his mouth with a napkin and stood up. He walked over to his wallet, which was sitting on the counter, my counter. He pulled out a single $20 bill. He held it out to me. He didn't place it in my hand. He held it just out of reach, so I had to step forward and take it from him. It was a power move. Subtlety is not Gavin's strong suit. "Here," he said. "This should cover gas for a few days. We will handle the groceries. We will pay the bills. You don't need to worry your head about money anymore, Caleb. It is too much stress for someone your age." I looked at the $20, a crisp portrait of Andrew Jackson. I looked at Gavin. He was smiling. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a jailer who has just locked the cell door. "You are putting me on an allowance," I asked softly. "In my own house." "It is not an allowance, Caleb. It is a stipend. It is fiscal responsibility. We are trying to build a future here, and we can't have you bleeding cash on whatever it is you spend money on. Old car parts. Junk. Make it last," he added, turning back to his sushi. "Inflation is a bitch." I took the money. I crumpled it in my fist. It took every ounce of discipline I had not to drive my fist into his jaw. But I thought of the warehouse. I thought of the millions sitting in the dark safe and sound. I thought of Rachel preparing the trap. "Thank you, Gavin," I whispered, staring at his back. "Thank you for clarifying everything." He waved a hand over his shoulder, dismissing me. I walked to my room. I smoothed out the $20 bill and placed it on my nightstand next to the picture of Beatrice. "I am going to frame this bill one day," I told her photo. "This $20 is going to cost him everything." He thought he had cut off my air supply. He didn't know I could hold my breath longer than he could stay afloat. The strangulation had begun, but he was the one with the noose around his neck. He just hadn't felt the rope tighten yet. Paranoia is a young man's game. When you get to be my age, you don't get paranoid. You just get observant. You notice when the pattern changes. You notice when the wind shifts. And you definitely notice when a white Tesla is following you 3 car lengths back, trying desperately to blend in with a line of heavy-duty delivery trucks. 2 days after Gavin put me on that humiliating $20 allowance, I decided to go to work. Not to a job site, but to my sanctuary. I walked out to my Ford F-150. It is a '98 model faded red paint with a dent in the rear bumper from a job in '89. To Gavin, it is a piece of junk that brings down property values. To me, it is reliable. It starts every time. I pulled out of the driveway at 7 in the morning. I didn't look back, but I checked the rearview mirror. Sure enough, the garage door opened and Gavin's electric toy slid out. He wasn't going to job interviews. He was tailing me. He thought he was being subtle, keeping his distance, but he didn't realize that in an industrial district, a pristine white electric car stands out like a diamond in a coal mine. I drove slowly. I took the long route through the city heading toward the old manufacturing district. This is the part of town the gentrifiers haven't fully conquered yet. It smells of diesel, wet concrete, and rust. It is a landscape of brick buildings with boarded-up windows and chain-link fences topped with razor wire. I pulled up to my warehouse. From the outside, it looks like a tomb. The brick is stained with soot from the factories that used to run 24 hours a day in the 50s. The windows are painted black. The sign above the door is faded so badly you can barely read the word Robinson. To the untrained eye, it looks like a place where you store garbage or maybe where drug deals happen. That is exactly how I like it. Camouflage isn't just for soldiers, it is for anyone with something to protect. I unlocked the heavy steel gate. I could feel Gavin watching me from down the block. He had pulled over near a fire hydrant pretending to look at his phone. I let the heavy chain rattle loudly. I wanted him to hear the weight of it. I drove the truck inside and hit the button to close the roller door. As soon as that door slammed shut, the world changed. The darkness vanished as the motion sensor LED lights flickered on row by row, illuminating the cathedral I had built. The air inside didn't smell like rot. It smelled of high-octane fuel, cured leather, and carnauba wax. The floor wasn't cracked concrete, it was polished epoxy shining like a mirror. And sitting there in the center of the vast space were my babies. Gavin thought I was hiding cash. He thought I was stuffing bills into coffee cans. He had no idea. My retirement fund wasn't paper, it was metal. Directly in front of me was a 1967 Mustang Fastback painted a deep midnight blue. I had spent 3 years restoring every bolt, every valve, every stitch of the upholstery. It wasn't just a car. It was a piece of art worth upwards of $200,000. Next to it sat the crown jewel, a Shelby Cobra. An original chassis I had found in a barn in Texas 10 years ago. It looked like a wreck when I bought it, but now it was a $1 million machine that purred like a tiger. There were rows of them, a Jaguar E-Type, an old Ford Bronco from the 70s that was currently trending in the collector market for 6 figures, And along the walls on heavy industrial shelving were crates of vintage aircraft parts, propellers, altimeters, engine blocks from World War II fighters. Things that museums and private collectors would kill for. I wasn't a hoarder. I was a curator. I spent the next 3 hours doing what I loved. I put on my coveralls. I turned on the jazz playlist that Gavin had banned from the house. I picked up a wrench. I wasn't an old man on an allowance in here. I was a master mechanic. I was a surgeon of steel. But I knew I couldn't just work. I had to feed the beast. I had to give Gavin something to see. I knew he couldn't see inside, but I knew he was still out there. And I knew he wasn't alone anymore. About an hour in, I had checked the security cameras. The Tesla was gone, but a gray sedan had replaced it. A man was sitting in the driver's seat with a long-lens camera, a private investigator. Gavin had hired a professional. Good. I decided to put on a show. I went to the back storage area. I found some old wooden crates. They were heavy reinforced boxes I used to ship engine blocks. I loaded 3 of them onto a dolly. They were empty, but I threw some heavy scrap iron inside just to give them weight. I opened the side door of the warehouse just enough to be seen from the street. I dragged the dolly out to the bed of my truck. I made a show of it. I groaned. I wiped sweat from my forehead. I looked around nervously, checking left and right, acting like a man with a guilty conscience. I lifted the crates onto the truck bed. I treated them like they were fragile, like they were filled with gold bars or stacks of hundreds. I covered them with a tarp and tied it down with excessive knots. I could hear the shutter of the camera clicking from down the street. Click, click, click. I went back inside, washed my hands, and drank a bottle of water. I looked at the Shelby one last time. "You are safe, girl," I whispered. "He doesn't even know you exist." When I drove home, the gray sedan followed me for 3 blocks and then peeled off. The job was done. The evidence was collected. That evening, the atmosphere in the house was electric. Gavin was practically vibrating. He was pacing the living room, a glass of scotch in his hand. He looked at me when I walked in, and for the first time in days, he didn't look at me with disgust. He looked at me with hunger. He had seen the photos. I went into the kitchen to make tea. I moved slowly, favoring my bad hip. I wanted to reinforce the image. Old, weak, vulnerable. Gavin walked into the kitchen. He leaned against the counter, swirling his drink. "Have a nice day, Caleb," he asked. "Go anywhere interesting." "Just for a drive," I said, staring into my teacup. "Just needed to clear my head." "Right," he said. "A drive. You know, Caleb, I have been thinking. That warehouse of yours, it must cost a fortune to maintain. The electricity, the property tax, it is paid for," I said. Sure. But what is inside?" "Just old junk, right? That is what you told Maya. Just things," I said. "Nothing of value to anyone but me." Gavin smiled. It was a shark's smile. He took a sip of his scotch. "You know, honesty is important in a family, Caleb. Maya worries that you are hiding things. Secrets can be a burden. If you have assets that you are worried about, maybe cash you have been saving for a rainy day, you should tell us. Banks aren't safe. I get that. But leaving things in a dusty old warehouse, that is risky." I looked him in the eye. "There is no money in that warehouse, Gavin." He laughed. A short, sharp bark of a laugh. He didn't believe a word of it. He had the photos. He had seen me struggling with the heavy crates. In his mind, he had already spent the money. He imagined stacks of dirty cash from off-the-books welding jobs. He imagined gold coins. He was projecting his own greed onto my silence. I took my tea and went to my room. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan. The walls of the house are thin. I could hear Gavin's voice coming from the study, my study, the one he had colonized. He was on the phone. I crept to the door and pressed my ear against the wood. "Are you sure Gavin was saying?" His voice was hushed but intense. I couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but I could fill in the blanks. It was the private investigator. "Yeah, I saw the photos," Gavin said. "He was moving crates, heavy ones. He looked terrified anyone would see him. It has to be cash, or maybe gold. What else would an old paranoia case like him hoard?" There was a pause. Gavin listened. "What do you mean, security?" Gavin's voice dropped. "Military grade." "Like what?" Another pause. "Sensors, biometrics." "You have to be kidding me. It is a dump. Why would he have a $10,000 alarm system on a dump unless—" I smiled in the darkness. The investigator was doing his job. He had scanned the perimeter. He had seen the cameras. He had probably tried to ping the network and hit a firewall that the Pentagon would be proud of. Gavin sounded breathless now. Okay, listen to me. That confirms it. You don't guard garbage with military tech. He is sitting on a fortune. A literal fortune. We need to get in there. The legal route is taking too long. If I can just get the doors open. He stopped talking. He was listening again. Yeah, I know it is risky. But we are talking about millions here. I can feel it. I will handle the old man. I just need you to find a way to bypass that system. I don't care what it costs. Just get me a way in. He hung up. I walked back to my bed and sat down. My heart was beating steady and slow. Gavin wasn't scared off by the security. He was emboldened by it. The complexity of the lock only proved the value of the treasure. He was going to come for it. He was going to come hard. He thought he was hunting a pot of gold. He didn't realize he was walking into a dragon's den. I looked at the picture of Beatrice on the nightstand. He is going to try to break in B, I whispered. He is going to bring his bolt cutters and his greed, and he is going to try to take what we built. I turned off the lamp. Let him come. The cameras are rolling, the sensors are active, and I have a few more surprises in that warehouse than just pepper spray. The trap was set. Now I just had to wait for the mouse to get hungry enough to snap the bar. And Gavin was starving. There is a specific kind of heartbreak that comes from watching your own child look at you with the eyes of a stranger. It is a pain sharper than any welding spark I have ever felt against my skin. For weeks, Gavin had been chipping away at the foundation of my relationship with Maya, using half-truths and gaslighting to paint me as a confused, bitter old man. But I didn't realize how deep the cracks were until I tried to repair them. It was a Wednesday afternoon and the house was quiet for once. Gavin was out, presumably spending his allowance or meeting with his private investigator. I found Maya in the kitchen, staring into a cup of herbal tea. She looked thin. The spark that used to define her, that fierce intelligence she inherited from her mother, seemed dimmed, suffocated by the constant anxiety of pleasing a man who could never be pleased. I sat down opposite her. I didn't want to fight. I just wanted my daughter back. Maya, I said softly, we need to talk about what is happening here. She stiffened immediately. Her shoulders went up, a defensive posture I had seen her use 1,000 times when she was a teenager trying to hide a bad report card. There is nothing to talk about, Dad, she said, not meeting my eyes. We are fine. Gavin is working hard on his new venture. We just need a little time to get back on our feet. It is not about the money, I said. I reached across the table to touch her hand, but she pulled it away. It is about respect. It is about how he treats you, and how he treats me in my own home. He threw away your mother's records, Maya. He put me on an allowance. This isn't normal. This is control. Maya slammed her mug down. Tea sloshed onto the table. Stop it, she snapped. Her eyes were suddenly blazing, but not with clarity. With indoctrination. Why are you always so hard on him? You have been picking apart everything he does since the day we met. I am hard on him because he is a liar. Maya, I said, keeping my voice steady. He is not a liar. He is a visionary, she shouted. He is under so much pressure right now. You have no idea what it is like to try and build something in this economy. He is trying to secure our future, and all you do is judge him. Then she said it. The words that Gavin had planted in her mind, the poison seed that had finally sprouted. You just don't like him because he is white. Isn't that it? I sat back stunned. The air left my lungs. What? I whispered. You heard me, she said, her voice shaking. You and Mom always talked about black excellence. You always wanted me to marry a doctor or a lawyer from the community, and now I bring home a white entrepreneur and you can't stand it. You are prejudiced, Dad. You are so stuck in the past fighting wars that ended 50 years ago that you can't see a good man when he is standing right in front of you. I looked at my daughter. I remembered holding her when she was 3 days old, promising to protect her from the ugliness of the world. I remembered teaching her that character is the only currency that matters, and now she was using my own history, my own struggle as a weapon to defend the man who was robbing us blind. I am not prejudiced, Maya, I said, my voice heavy with sorrow. I don't dislike him because he is white. I dislike him because he is hollow. She stood up, scraping her chair against the floor. I don't want to hear it. If you can't be supportive, then just stay out of our way. She stormed out of the room, leaving me alone with the spilled tea. I wiped it up with a rag. It seems I was destined to clean up messes in this house one way or another. The punishment for my attempt at an intervention came 2 days later. Gavin announced that he was hosting a networking mixer at the house. He called it a launch party for his crypto mining syndicate. "We need to make a good impression, Caleb," he told me, pacing the living room like he owned the deed. "These are high net worth individuals, potential investors. I need the house to look impeccable." He paused, looking me up and down. He was wearing a new suit while I was in my usual flannel and work pants. "And we need help with the service," he added. "The catering company canceled on me last minute. Can you believe that unprofessionalism is a plague?" He smiled that shark smile. "I was thinking, since you are just sitting around the house anyway, maybe you could help pass the hors d'oeuvres. Just keep the wine glasses full, help clear the plates. It would really help Maya out. She is so stressed about this going well. You want to help Maya, don't you?" He knew exactly which button to press. He knew I would walk through fire for my daughter. He knew I would swallow any indignity to keep her from being embarrassed in front of his friends. "Fine," I said. "I will help." "Great," he said, clapping his hands. "Oh, and Caleb, wear something appropriate. A white shirt and black slacks, maybe a tie. We want to look professional." He wanted me to wear a uniform. He wanted the master of the house to dress like the help. That Saturday evening, I stood in front of the mirror in my bedroom. I buttoned a white crisp shirt all the way to the neck. I tied a black tie. I looked at my reflection. I didn't see a servant. I saw a spy. I saw a man undercover in enemy territory. I put on my game face, the mask of the docile, helpful old man. The guests arrived at 7. There were about 30 of them. They were exactly the type of people I expected, young, loud, and desperate to prove they were important. They parked their leased BMWs on my lawn. They tracked mud onto Beatrice's Persian rug. They filled the air with vapor smoke and empty jargon about disruption and leverage. I moved through the crowd with a silver tray of champagne flutes. I was invisible. To them, I was just part of the furniture, an old black man in a white shirt whose only purpose was to serve champagne. I offered to a group of men standing by the fireplace. One of them took a glass without looking at me. He continued his story. "So I told him, if you don't have the capital, don't waste my time. It is a ruthless market, bro." Another man bumped into me, spilling a drop of wine on my sleeve. He didn't apologize. He just glanced at the stain and moved away as if I were the one who had offended him. I saw Maya across the room. She was wearing a dress that was too tight, holding a glass of wine she didn't drink. She looked miserable. Every time Gavin laughed, a loud braying sound that grated on my nerves, she flinched. She caught my eye once. I saw shame in her expression. She knew this was wrong. She knew her father shouldn't be serving drinks to these children, but she was too deep in the hole to climb out. I went to the kitchen to refill the tray. My hands were shaking not from age, but from the effort of restraining my rage. I gripped the neck of the champagne bottle like I wanted to strangle it. "Calm, Caleb," I whispered to myself. "You are steel. You are stone." I walked back into the living room. Gavin was holding court near the display cabinet. That cabinet was Beatrice's pride and joy. It held the few precious things we had collected over 40 years of marriage. Crystal figurines, a silver tea set, and in the center, a large hand-painted ceramic vase. We bought that vase in Morocco on our 30th anniversary. I remembered the heat of the market, the smell of spices, and the way Beatrice's face lit up when she saw the intricate blue patterns. She had carried it on her lap the entire flight home, terrified it would break. It wasn't just clay. It was a memory of the woman I loved. Gavin was leaning against the cabinet, gesturing wildly with a half-empty glass. "The key to this business is aggression," he shouted to his audience. "You have to take up space. You have to dominate the environment." He swung his arm back to emphasize his point. His elbow connected with the vase. It happened in slow motion. I saw the vase wobble. I saw it tip. I lunged forward, dropping the tray of champagne, but I was too far away. The vase hit the hardwood floor. The sound was like a gunshot in the crowded room. The ceramic shattered into 1,000 jagged blue shards. The room went silent. The music seemed to stop. Everyone turned to look. I stood frozen, staring at the pieces of my wife's memory scattered across the floor. My heart hammered against my ribs. I felt a physical pain in my chest, a sharp tearing sensation. Gavin looked down at the mess. He didn't look horrified. He didn't look sorry. He looked annoyed. "Oops," he said, letting out a nervous chuckle. "Party foul." He looked at me standing there with my white shirt stained with spilled champagne. "Don't worry about it, folks," he announced to the room, waving his hand. "Just a little accident. Caleb, can you get the broom? It is just some cheap pottery. We were planning to redecorate anyway." Cheap pottery. The blood roared in my ears. The world narrowed down to a tunnel vision focused entirely on Gavin's smiling, dismissive face. The veins in my neck bulged. My fists clenched at my sides, the knuckles turning the color of old bone. I wanted to cross the room. I wanted to take his throat in my hands, hands that could bend steel pipe and squeeze until that smile vanished forever. I took a step forward. Maya stepped in front of me. She looked terrified. "Dad, please," she whispered. "Please don't." I looked at her. I saw the fear. Not fear of me, but fear of the scene. Fear of the social suicide. I looked at Gavin. He was watching me, daring me to do something. If I attacked him now in front of 30 witnesses, I would be the violent, unstable old man he claimed I was. He would have the perfect excuse to lock me away. I took a deep breath. It rattled in my chest. I turned around and walked to the kitchen. I got the broom and the dustpan. I returned to the living room. I knelt on the floor, my knees cracking loudly in the silence. I began to sweep up the pieces of the Morocco vase. I picked up the larger shards with my bare hands. One of them sliced my thumb. A drop of bright red blood fell onto the blue ceramic. I didn't flinch. I swept it all up. Gavin had already turned back to his guests. "All right, show is over. Who needs a refill?" The party resumed. The noise level rose again. I was forgotten. I took the dustpan to the kitchen and emptied it into the trash. I stared at the broken pieces for a long moment. "Goodbye, B," I whispered. "I'm sorry I couldn't save it." I washed the blood off my thumb and wrapped it in a paper towel. The party dragged on for another hour, but I didn't go back out there. I stayed in the kitchen washing glasses, drying plates. Around midnight, the last guests finally stumbled out. The house was quiet again, smelling of stale wine and vape juice. I was wiping down the counter when I heard footsteps in the hallway. It was Gavin. He was on the phone again. He didn't know I was still in the kitchen. He thought I had retired to my room to lick my wounds. "Yeah, it went great," he said, his voice slurring slightly. "I hooked 2 whales. They are ready to invest." He paused. "No, not yet. But I am close. The old man is broken. Did you see him tonight? He was sweeping the floor like a good little boy. He has got no fight left in him." I stood perfectly still, holding a dish towel. "I will get the papers for the warehouse this week," Gavin continued. "I am going to pressure Maya. She is ready to crack. We will tell him it is for his own good. And if he refuses... Well, I made some calls today. There is a facility called Shady Pines on the outskirts of town. State-run. Cheap. It is where they put the ones who can't take care of themselves." He laughed. It was a cruel, wet sound. "Get the room ready, buddy. The old man is heading to a nursing home by Friday. I will be driving the Tesla to the bank by Monday." He walked past the kitchen door and went up the stairs. I stood there in the dark. The pain of the broken vase was gone. The humiliation of the white shirt was gone. All that was left was a cold, hard clarity. He was planning to institutionalize me. He was going to throw me into a state facility to rot so he could steal my legacy. I took off the white shirt. I folded it neatly and placed it on the counter. "You think I am broken, Gavin?" I thought. "You think I have no fight left?" I went to the back door and looked out at the night. The stars were shining cold and distant. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life, son. You stopped treating me like a person and started treating me like a problem. And if there is one thing a welder knows how to do, it is how to fix a problem. You use fire, you use pressure, and you cut away the rot until there is nothing left but clean steel." Friday was 3 days away. I didn't need 3 days. I only needed 1. They say the most dangerous poisons don't taste like anything at all. They just slide down your throat warm and inviting until it is too late to scream. But Gavin was not a master assassin. He was just a desperate, greedy man with a bottle of sleeping pills and a plan that was as sloppy as his business ethics. It was Friday evening. The air in the house was heavy, charged with the static of unspoken threats. After the incident with the vase, Gavin had changed tactics. He wasn't aggressive anymore. He was solicitous. He was kind. It was terrifying. I was sitting in the living room reading a book on hydraulic mechanics, or pretending to. My eyes were actually tracking Gavin's reflection in the glass of the patio door. He was in the kitchen making tea. I heard the clink of the spoon against ceramic. I heard the hiss of the kettle. And then I heard a small, distinct rattle, the sound of a pill bottle being opened. He hummed to himself. It was a cheerful, mindless tune, the sound of a man who thinks he has already won. He walked into the living room carrying 2 mugs, steam curled up from the dark liquid. "Here you go, Caleb," he said, placing a mug on the coaster next to me. "I made some of that herbal blend you like, chamomile and valerian root. Good for relaxation. You have seemed so tense lately." He sat opposite me with his own mug. He smiled. It was the smile of a predator watching a wounded deer drink from a poisoned stream. I looked at the tea. It looked normal. It smelled of chamomile. But my nose, trained by decades of smelling ozone-burning flux and gas leaks, picked up something else. A faint, chalky undertone. The smell of processed chemicals trying to hide in nature. "Thank you, Gavin," I said. "That is very thoughtful." I lifted the mug. I saw his eyes widen slightly. He was watching my throat. I brought the rim to my lips. But I didn't drink. I pretended to blow on the hot liquid. "It is a bit hot," I said. "I will just let it cool for a minute." Gavin looked disappointed, but he nodded. "Take your time. It works better when you drink it warm." Then his phone buzzed. It was always buzzing. He glanced down at the screen. That split second was all I needed. I didn't switch the cups with him, that would have been poetic, but I needed him awake to incriminate himself. I needed him to play out his little drama so I could trap him in it. Instead, I poured the contents of my mug into the large potted fern standing right next to my armchair. The soil drank the poisoned tea instantly. In the same motion, I brought the empty mug back to my lips and feigned a swallow. I made a gulping sound. "Ah," I said, setting the mug down. "That hits the spot." Gavin looked up. He saw the mug was empty. A flash of triumph crossed his face so raw and ugly it made my stomach turn. "Good," he said. "You need your rest, Caleb. You really do." I waited 5 minutes. Then I started the show. I let my eyelids droop. I let my head loll to the side. I dropped my book. It hit the floor with a loud thud. "Caleb," Gavin asked. He didn't sound worried. He sounded excited. I feel dizzy," I mumbled, slurring my words intentionally. I tried to stand up, but I made my legs buckle. I stumbled into the coffee table, knocking over a stack of magazines. "Gavin," I said, reaching out a hand. "Something is wrong. The room, it is spinning." Gavin stood up, but he didn't reach out to help me. He stepped back, pulling his phone out. "Oh no," he said, his voice loud and theatrical. Maya, come quick. It is your dad." He wasn't calling 911. He was calling his audience. Maya ran down the stairs. When she saw me slumped on the sofa, clutching my chest, her face went pale. "Dad, what happened?" "I don't know," Gavin said. "He just started acting crazy. He was talking nonsense, stumbling around. I think he is having an episode." "An episode," Maya cried, kneeling beside me. "Dad, can you hear me?" I looked at her with glassy eyes. I let my jaw go slack. Who are you?" I whispered. "Where is Beatrice?" "I want Beatrice." It broke my heart to do it. Maya burst into tears. But I had to play the part. I had to let them think I was gone. Suddenly the doorbell rang. It was perfect timing, almost too perfect. "I will get it," Gavin said. "It is probably Dr. Reeves. I called him when Caleb started acting weird earlier. I had a feeling this would happen." Dr. Reeves. I knew the name. He wasn't our family doctor. He was a guy Gavin played golf with. A man who had lost his medical license in 2 states before settling here. Gavin came back with a tall, slick-looking man carrying a black bag. "This is Dr. Reeves," Gavin said. "He is a specialist in geriatric cognitive decline." The doctor didn't even check my pulse. He didn't check my pupils. He just stood over me, looking at me like I was a broken toaster. "Interesting," Reeves said. "Rapid onset confusion, disorientation. Look at the tremors." I was shaking my hands violently now, adding to the effect. "Is it a stroke?" Maya asked, sobbing. "No," Reeves said, shaking his head. "This looks like acute dementia psychosis. It is very common in men his age, especially after a trauma. He is a danger to himself, Maya. And to you." Gavin stepped in, putting a hand on Maya's shoulder. "See, I told you, babe. He is losing it. He almost burned the kitchen down yesterday, a lie, and now this. We can't care for him here. We aren't equipped." Maya looked at me. "Dad," she whispered. I stared past her, drooling slightly. "I am late for the shift," I mumbled. "The pipeline is leaking. I need my welding torch." Maya buried her face in her hands. "So what do we do?" Gavin asked the doctor. "He needs immediate professional observation," Reeves said. "I can sign a temporary commitment order. There is a facility called Shady Pines. They have a bed open. I can have a transport here in 10 minutes. Shady Pines, the warehouse for the unwanted. The place people go to die in urine-soaked sheets." "Do it," Gavin said. "Call them." Maya looked up. "No, not Shady Pines. Isn't there somewhere better, babe?" Gavin said, his voice hardening. "We don't have the money for private care. Not since he... Well, you know, this is the only option. It is for his safety." Maya looked at me lying there, helpless and senile. She looked at her husband, who seemed so strong, so in control. She broke. "Okay," she whispered. "Just help him, please." Gavin nodded to the doctor. "Make the call." I lay there and listened to them sign my life away. I listened to Gavin's fake sighs of relief. I listened to the doctor scribbling on a clipboard. They thought I was a vegetable. They didn't know I was recording every word in my memory, preparing a transcript for the courtroom. 10 minutes later, the ambulance arrived. But it wasn't the private transport Gavin expected. It was the city EMS. Apparently, Dr. Reeves's special transport was busy, so he had to call 911 to make it look legitimate. 2 paramedics walked in with a stretcher. And that was when God smiled on me. The lead paramedic was a large man with a thick beard. His name was Mike. Big Mike. I had fixed his father's transmission for free back in '95. I had watched Mike grow up in this neighborhood. He knew me. He knew I was sharp as a tack. Mike looked at me, then at Gavin. "What is the situation?" "Male 73, acute psychotic episode, possible dementia," Gavin rattled off. "He is aggressive. We need him restrained and taken to Shady Pines for evaluation. Dr. Reeves here signed the order." Mike looked at Reeves, then looked down at me. "Mr. Robinson," he asked. I kept up the act for Gavin. I stared blankly. Mike leaned in close to check my vitals. He blocked Gavin's view with his broad back. As soon as Mike's face was inches from mine, I stopped shaking. I looked him dead in the eye. My gaze was clear, sharp, and focused. I winked. Mike froze. Then I whispered, barely moving my lips, "Play along, Mike. It is a trap. Get me out of here." Mike didn't flinch. He is a professional. He saw the situation instantly. The slick doctor, the nervous daughter, the overly eager son-in-law, and the old man playing possum. He gave a barely perceptible nod. "Right," Mike said, standing up and turning to Gavin. "He looks unstable. We will take him in, but we have to take him to General Hospital first for clearance. Standard protocol. We can't take him straight to a nursing home without a tox screen." Gavin frowned. "A tox screen? Just to rule out infection?" Mike lied smoothly. "Don't worry, we will handle him." They loaded me onto the stretcher. Maya kissed my forehead, her tears wetting my face. "I am sorry, Dad," she whispered. "I am so sorry." I wanted to tell her it was okay. I wanted to tell her that her father wasn't crazy, just hunting, but I stayed silent. Gavin walked us to the door. He looked triumphant. He patted my leg as they lifted me into the ambulance. "Don't worry, Caleb," he said low enough so only I could hear. "I will take good care of the warehouse." The doors slammed shut. As soon as the engine started and we pulled away from the curb, I sat up. I wiped the drool from my chin. "You okay, Mr. Robinson?" Mike asked from the front. "I am better than okay, Mike," I said. "I am angry." I pulled my phone out of my hidden pocket. My hands were steady. I typed a text to Rachel, my lawyer. They took the bait. Gavin tried to drug me. He brought in a fake doctor to commit me. "I am in the ambulance heading to General. Meet me there with the police and the toxicology kit. It is time to haul the net in." I hit send. I looked out the back window of the ambulance. I could see my house getting smaller in the distance. Gavin was probably popping a bottle of champagne right now. He was probably looking for the keys to the warehouse. "Go ahead, boy," I thought. "Go find the keys. Go open the door. You think you just got rid of the old man. You have no idea you just handed me the murder weapon." The medical trap was supposed to be my end. Instead, it was his confession. And I had witnesses. I sat back and closed my eyes, not to sleep, but to visualize the look on his face when he realizes that the senile old man he sent away is coming back with a fleet of lawyers and the wrath of God. The ride to the hospital was the most peaceful I had felt in months. Silence is beautiful when you know the noise is about to end. While I was lying in a hospital bed hooked up to monitors that beeped in a steady rhythmic cadence, my home was being gutted. I knew it would happen. I had counted on it. The moment the ambulance doors closed and the siren wailed into the night, Gavin didn't sit down to weep for his father-in-law. He didn't call relatives to update them on my condition. He didn't comfort his wife. He waited until Maya went to bed exhausted and weeping, and then he went to work. I know this because I have cameras in my study. Small pinhole lenses hidden in the spine of a hollowed-out encyclopedia and the eye of a mounted fish on the wall. I watched the footage later with my lawyer Rachel. It was like watching a nature documentary about a scavenger feasting on a carcass. Gavin entered my study at 11 o'clock at night. He didn't turn on the main light. He used the flashlight on his phone, cutting through the darkness like a burglar in his own home. He went straight for the filing cabinet. This was the steel cabinet I had kept locked for 20 years, the one he had tried to pry open with a screwdriver the week before. He didn't use a screwdriver this time. He used a crowbar he must have brought in from the garage. I watched on the screen as he wedged the metal bar into the gap. He grunted, putting his whole shallow weight into it. The metal shrieked a sound that must have echoed through the house, but Maya, sedated by grief and exhaustion, slept through it. The lock popped with a snap. Gavin yanked the drawer open. He started pulling out files, tossing them onto the floor. My medical records, my tax returns from 1995, the blueprints for the house. He didn't care about any of it. He was looking for one thing. Then he stopped. He pulled out a thick manila envelope. I saw his shoulders relax. I saw the beam of his flashlight steady on the label. Property deed, commercial district. He sat down in my leather chair, spinning it around to face the desk. He opened the envelope and pulled out the document. It was the deed to the warehouse. Or rather, it was a very convincing photocopy of an old deed I had filed years ago before I transferred the property into the trust. To Gavin, it looked like the Holy Grail. It listed Caleb Robinson as the sole owner. It listed the square footage. He kissed the paper. Actually kissed it. Then he did something that sealed his fate. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a pen. He pulled out a sheet of tracing paper. He pulled out an old check I had written for the water bill, which he must have fished out of the trash. He was going to forge my signature to transfer the title. I watched him practice. He spent an hour hunched over my desk, the tip of his tongue poking out of the corner of his mouth like a schoolboy taking a test. He traced the curve of the C. He practiced the loop of the R. He filled 3 sheets of paper with my name over and over again. Caleb Robinson. Caleb Robinson. Caleb Robinson. He was stealing my identity stroke by stroke. He was so arrogant, so sure that I would never come back from the nursing home, that he didn't even try to make it look like a shaky old man's signature. He signed it with a flourish. He signed it with the confidence of a man who thinks he owns the world. Once the document was signed, he took a picture of it. He started making calls. It was 1 a.m. Who answers a business call at 1 a.m, Sharks? That is who. I listened to the audio from the camera. Vance. It is Gavin, he whispered, leaning back in my chair, putting his feet up on my desk. I have it. I have the deed. The old man signed it over to me before he lost his faculties. Yeah, it is legit. He paused, listening to the voice on the other end. I want to move it fast, Vance. I have a liquidity issue with another project. I need cash by Monday. I know what it is worth. The comps in the area are 15 million. He listened again. His face fell. 2 million. Are you kidding me? It is prime real estate. He sat up, gripping the phone. Okay, look. 2 million cash. Wiring tomorrow. Fine. But we close immediately. No inspections, no environmental studies, as is. He was selling a $15 million legacy for $2 million just to cover his gambling debts. He was practically giving it away to a fence, a shady developer known for buying distressed properties and turning them into cheap condos. The voice on the other end must have asked a question because Gavin hesitated. Access. Yeah, of course I have access. I have the keys. I can show it to you tomorrow morning. Meet me there at 9. Bring the contract. He hung up. He let out a long breath and ran his hands through his hair. $2 million. It was enough to pay off the loan sharks, buy a new car, and keep pretending he was a success for another year. He stood up and went to the key hook by the back door. This was where I kept the spare keys for the house, the shed, and the truck. He scanned the ring. He frowned. He went back to the desk and dumped out the contents of the drawers. He checked the potted plant. He checked the cookie jar in the kitchen. Panic started to set in. I could see it in his body language. He started moving faster, tearing cushions off the sofa, looking under the rugs. Where are they? He hissed to himself. Where are the damn keys? He didn't know that the only key to the warehouse was on a chain around my neck, currently resting against my chest in a hospital bed 5 miles away. He had promised the buyer access at 9 a.m. If he couldn't open the door, the deal was off. The shark wouldn't transfer $2 million for a building he couldn't step inside. Gavin stood in the middle of the living room, hands on his hips, breathing hard. It was 3 in the morning now. He was running out of time. He needed to get into that warehouse. He needed to prove he owned it. He walked out to the garage. The camera in the garage showed him rummaging through my tool chest, the one he usually wouldn't touch because it was too greasy. He threw wrenches and screwdrivers onto the concrete floor. Finally, he found them. A pair of heavy-duty bolt cutters. The red handles were chipped and worn from years of use. They were heavy. I used to use them to cut rebar. Gavin picked them up. He weighed them in his hands. A grim smile spread across his face. If he couldn't use the key, he would make his own door. He would cut the chain, replace the lock with his own, and when the buyer arrived, he would act like he had opened it normally. Who would know? The old man was locked away in a psych ward. Maya was sedated. The neighbors didn't care. He was the man of the house now. He was the king. And kings don't need keys. They take what they want. I watched him carry the bolt cutters back into the house. He set them by the front door ready for the morning. He poured himself a glass of my scotch, my 20-year-old single malt, and toasted his reflection in the hallway mirror. To the winner, he whispered. I lay in my hospital bed and watched the feed on my phone. The nurse came in to check my vitals. Your heart rate is up. Mr. Robinson, she said, concerned. Are you in pain? No, ma'am, I said, turning off the screen. I am just anticipating a reunion. I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. I visualized the morning. I visualized Gavin driving his Tesla to the warehouse. I visualized him pulling out those bolt cutters, and I visualized myself waiting for him. Because what Gavin didn't know was that I wasn't staying in the hospital. As soon as the sun came up, I was checking myself out against medical advice. I had a meeting to attend. He was going back to the beginning. He was going back to the moment where this story started. He was heading to the warehouse with a pair of cutters and a heart full of greed. But this time, the camera wouldn't just be recording. This time, the trap would spring shut. The forgery was the nail in his coffin. The break-in would be the hammer. I rested my head on the pillow. I needed my strength. Tomorrow was going to be a heavy day. Tomorrow I was going to teach my son-in-law the difference between ownership and theft. And the tuition for this lesson was going to cost him everything he had. Most men would have run. When a cloud of military-grade pepper powder explodes in your face, searing your eyes and filling your lungs with liquid fire, the natural instinct is to flee, to seek water, to seek safety. But greed is a powerful anesthetic. It overrides pain. It overrides logic. And Gavin was not just greedy. He was desperate. I watched on the screen as he stumbled out of the vestibule, retching and gasping for air. His face was a mask of red, swollen agony. Mucus and tears were streaming down his chin, ruining his expensive silk tie. He looked pathetic. But then something shifted. I saw him wipe his eyes with his sleeve, smearing the irritant further. He didn't walk toward his Tesla. He turned back toward the gate. He screamed. It wasn't a word. It was a guttural roar of pure frustration. He bent down and groped blindly on the pavement until his hand closed around the handle of the bolt cutters. He was going back in. I sat up in my hospital bed, ignoring the protests of the heart monitor. This wasn't just a break-in anymore. This was a meltdown. Gavin had promised a buyer access at 9 in the morning. He had already spent the $2 million in his head. He couldn't let a little thing like chemical warfare stop him. He swung the heavy cutters at the lock. Clang. Sparks flew in the darkness. He swung again. He was blind, swinging wild, driven by a maniacal need to conquer the metal that stood between him and his salvation. But he had forgotten one variable. The silent alarm didn't just trigger the pepper spray, it called the cavalry. Blue and red lights washed over the alleyway, bouncing off the wet brick walls. A siren chirped, that short, sharp sound that tells you the game is over. Gavin froze. He was mid-swing, the bolt cutters raised above his head like a weapon. 2 squad cars screeched to a halt, blocking his Tesla. "Drop the weapon," a voice amplified by a loudspeaker boomed. "Drop it now!" Gavin blinked, trying to clear his vision. He didn't drop the cutters immediately. He looked confused, disoriented by the flashing lights and the burning in his eyes. "I said drop it! Get on the ground!" 3 officers stepped out, guns drawn. They weren't taking chances. To them, Gavin looked like a deranged vandal attacking a commercial property in the middle of the night. Gavin finally realized what was happening. He dropped the heavy tool. It clattered loudly on the asphalt. He put his hands up, squinting against the glare of the spotlights. "Wait!" he screamed, his voice cracking. "Don't shoot! I am the owner. This is my property." I leaned closer to my phone screen. This was the moment. This was the turn. One of the officers, a young guy with a high and tight haircut, approached him cautiously. He kicked the bolt cutters away and grabbed Gavin's wrist, spinning him around and slamming him against the hood of the Tesla. "You are the owner?" the officer asked, patting him down. "Is that why you are breaking in with bolt cutters at 3 a.m? "Yes, I mean no," Gavin stammered. "I lost my keys. I locked myself out. Check my wallet." "The deed is in my jacket pocket." The officer pulled Gavin's wallet out. Then he reached into the inside pocket of the suit jacket and retrieved the folded piece of paper. The forgery. The document Gavin had spent hours tracing the night before. Gavin twisted his head, trying to look at the cop. "Read it. It says Caleb Robinson transferred the property to Gavin Miller. That is me. I have power of attorney. I own this building." The officer unfolded the paper. He shined his flashlight on it. He looked at the signature. Then he looked at the building. "If you are the owner, why did the security system pepper spray you?" the officer asked dryly. "It is a malfunction," Gavin yelled. "The system is old. Look, just let me open the gate. I can prove it." The officer didn't let him go. He handed the paper to his partner. "Run a check on the address," he said. 404 Industrial Way. Check the property tax records. Let's see who actually owns this fortress." I held my breath. This was the trapdoor I had built 20 years ago, long before I ever met Gavin. I didn't build it for him. I built it because I'm a black man with assets in America, and I learned a long time ago that if you put your name on something valuable, someone will try to take it. So I never put my name on it. The partner spoke into his radio. "Dispatch, run a property check on 404 Industrial." We waited. The static of the radio was the only sound in the alley. Gavin was panting, his face pressed against the cold metal of his car. He looked confident. He knew he had forged the signature perfectly. He thought the records would show Caleb Robinson as the owner and his paper would validate the transfer. The radio crackled back. "Dispatch to Unit 1. Property at 404 Industrial Way is listed as a commercial holding." "Owner?" the officer asked. "Owner of record is Beatrice Holdings, LLC, incorporated in Delaware." The silence that followed was louder than the sirens. The officer looked at the forged deed. He shone his light on it again. "This paper says Caleb Robinson is transferring the title," the officer said. "But Caleb Robinson doesn't own this building." Gavin went rigid. "What?" The officer continued. "Caleb Robinson isn't on the deed, sir. This building belongs to a corporation, Beatrice Holdings." "No, that is impossible," Gavin shouted, struggling against the cuffs. "Caleb is my father-in-law. He told me he owned it. He has the keys." "Well, it looks like your father-in-law is just an employee or a tenant," the officer said, "because he definitely doesn't hold the title. And since he doesn't hold the title, he can't transfer it to you, which means this piece of paper you have here, it is worthless." He crumbled the forgery and shoved it back into Gavin's pocket. "You are trespassing, Mr. Miller, and you are in possession of burglary tools." "No," Gavin screamed. "It is a shell company. He must have moved it. It is still his. I am the legal guardian." "Save it for the judge," the officer said. "They didn't arrest him. Not yet. I hadn't filed the formal complaint. To them, it was a messy civil dispute between family members. They uncuffed him, but they didn't let him stay." The officer leaned in close to Gavin's face. "Here is what is going to happen," the officer said. "You are going to get in your electric car. You are going to go home. And if I see you anywhere near this gate again without a representative from Beatrice Holdings present, I will book you for attempted burglary and destruction of property. Do we understand each other?" Gavin looked at the warehouse. He looked at the dark windows that hid the millions of dollars he was so desperate to touch. He was so close. He was physically standing on the property, but he was locked out by a layer of protection he hadn't even considered. He nodded slowly. "Yes, I understand. Drive safe," the officer said, "and wash your face. You look like a mess." Gavin got into his Tesla. He sat there for a long time before starting the engine. I could see him hitting the steering wheel. He wasn't just angry, he was terrified. The buyer was coming in 5 hours. He had no deed. He had no keys. And now he knew that Caleb Robinson wasn't just a simple welder. I was a CEO. I turned off the phone screen and laid back against the hospital pillow. A nurse walked in to check the IV drip. "You are smiling, Mr. Robinson," she noted. "You must be feeling better." "I am feeling excellent," I said. I knew what Gavin was thinking right now as he drove home in defeat. He was thinking he needed to find out who controlled Beatrice Holdings. He was thinking he needed to find the corporate seal. He was thinking he could still salvage the deal if he could just forge the corporate documents. He was going to go home and tear my office apart again. He was going to look for the articles of incorporation, and he would find them. I wanted him to find them, because the articles of incorporation for Beatrice Holdings require 2 signatures for any asset transfer. One is mine. The other signature belongs to the vice president of the company, and the vice president of Beatrice Holdings is a woman named Maya Robinson. Gavin didn't know it, but he was about to steal from his own wife. He was about to commit a felony against the woman he claimed to love. And when he did that, when he crossed that final line, I wouldn't just take his freedom. I would take his marriage. I closed my eyes. The sun was coming up. The night of the raid was over. But the day of reckoning had just begun. I needed to get out of this hospital. I had a board meeting to prepare for, and the only agenda item was the complete and total destruction of Gavin Miller. Checking out of the hospital was the easy part. The toxicology screen came back clean, showing nothing but a therapeutic dose of blood pressure medication and a whole lot of caffeine. The doctor, a young resident who looked like he hadn't slept in a week, apologized profusely. He said it must have been a misunderstanding. I didn't correct him. I didn't tell him it was a failed assassination attempt by a man who couldn't even get the dosage right. I just signed the discharge papers, put on my flannel shirt, and walked out into the bright morning sun. The hard part was what came next. I had to break my daughter's heart to save her life. I called Maya from the hospital parking lot. She sounded wreck. Her voice was thick with tears and guilt. She thought her father had lost his mind. She thought she had betrayed me by agreeing to the nursing home. When I told her I was fine, that I was discharged and waiting for her outside, she didn't believe me at first. She kept asking if I had escaped. I told her to pick me up, but I told her not to bring Gavin. I told her if I saw that white Tesla, I would walk home. She arrived in her own car, a sensible sedan she had bought before she met Gavin. When she saw me standing on the curb, clear-eyed and steady, she burst into fresh tears. She hugged me like she was trying to hold on to a ghost. I held her tight, smelling the lavender shampoo she had used since she was a teenager. She was shaking. I didn't take her home. I didn't want to go back to that battlefield yet. I told her to drive to Big Daddy's Smokehouse. It is a small, run-down shack on the edge of the city, the kind of place with sticky tables and the smell of hickory smoke that gets into your pores and stays there for days. It was my favorite spot. Gavin hated it. He called it unsanitary. He wouldn't be caught dead there. That made it the safest place in the world. We sat in a booth in the back. I ordered a slab of ribs and sweet tea. Maya didn't order anything. She just shredded a paper napkin into tiny white confetti. "Dad," she started, her voice trembling. "About last night," Gavin said. "He said you were dangerous. He said you didn't know who I was." "Gavin says a lot of things, Maya," I interrupted gently. I took a sip of tea. "The question is, do you believe him or do you believe your own eyes? Look at me. Do I look like a man who doesn't know his own daughter?" She looked up. She searched my face for signs of the dementia Dr. Reeves had diagnosed. She found none. She found only the same father who had taught her to ride a bike, who had paid for her college, who had walked her down the aisle. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why would he lie? Why would he drug you?" "Because he is drowning." "Baby girl," I said, "and he is trying to use us as a raft." I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. I pulled out the envelope Rachel had given me. It wasn't the deed to the warehouse. It was something far more volatile. I slid it across the sticky table. "What is this?" she asked. "The truth," I said. "Open it." She hesitated. Her hand hovered over the manila folder like it was a hot stove. She knew deep down. She knew that whatever was in there was going to destroy the fantasy life she had built. But she was brave. My daughter has always been brave. She opened the clasp. She pulled out the stack of papers. The first page was a bankruptcy filing from Florida dated 5 years ago. Gavin Miller. Chapter 7. Liabilities. $3 million. Assets zero. Maya stared at it. He told me he had a successful exit from a tech startup in Miami, she stammered. He said he sold it for millions. He lied, I said. He didn't sell anything. He ran it into the ground and walked away with investors' money. Keep reading. She turned the page. A lawsuit from Chicago. Plaintiff Sarah Jenkins. Nature of suit, fraud, and embezzlement. Who is Sarah Jenkins? Maya asked, her voice barely a whisper. His first wife, I said. Maya dropped the paper. He told me he was never married. He said I was the first woman he ever loved enough to commit to. He was married for 2 years, Maya. He drained her savings account to fund a venture capital firm that didn't exist. When the money ran out, so did he. And the next page, that is his second wife, Elena. She is still paying off the credit cards he opened in her name. Maya was reading faster now. Her eyes were darting across the pages, absorbing the horror. The lies were stacking up like bricks. The fake degrees, the lawsuits, the restraining orders. But the last page was the one that mattered most. It wasn't a court document. It was a surveillance report from a private firm Rachel used. It listed Gavin's current financial status. Active debt, $500,000. Creditor, Vinnie Santoro. Maya looked up at me. Her face was pale, drained of all blood. Santoro. That sounds like a loan shark, I finished. Because that is what he is. Gavin isn't just broke, Maya. He is in debt to dangerous men. That is why he is so desperate to get into my warehouse. He doesn't want to build you an art studio. He needs to pay off a hitman before they break his legs. He tried to sell my property last night for pennies on the dollar just to save his own skin. Maya shook her head. No, Dad, this can't be real. I sleep next to him. I know him. He is stressed, yes, but he loves me. He wouldn't steal from us. He already has, I said. He forged my signature on a deed last night. The police caught him. Police, Maya gasped. They let him go because the deed was worthless, I said. But he tried, Maya. He tried to sell my legacy while he thought I was locked away in a padded room. She pushed the papers away. She covered her face with her hands. I could see her shoulders shaking. How she sobbed. How do you have all this? You are retired. You fix cars. How do you know about loan sharks and court records in Chicago? I reached across the table and took her hands. I pulled them away from her face, so she had to look at me. I am not just a welder, Maya. I spent 40 years working on pipelines that carry the lifeblood of this country. When a pipe cracks, things explode. People die. My job wasn't just to weld metal. It was to find the weak spots before they broke. I learned to look for stress fractures. I learned to look for corrosion under the paint. I leaned in closer. I am a fixer daughter. I fix pipes. I fix engines. And when a man comes into my house and tries to destroy my family, I fix that too. Maya stared at me. She saw a side of me she had never seen before. She saw the steel beneath the flannel. I paid the bill. I left a $20 tip, the exact amount Gavin had given me for my allowance. Go home, Maya, I said. Aren't you coming? She asked. Not yet, I said. I have one more stop to make. But you need to go home. You need to see him. And when you look at him, don't listen to his words. Watch his hands. Watch what he does when he thinks no one is watching. She nodded slowly. She gathered the papers and put them back in the envelope. She clutched it to her chest like a shield. She drove away in silence. I watched her go. I knew what she was going to find. I had checked the cameras before we left the hospital. Maya drove home in a daze. The drive took 20 minutes, but it must have felt like a lifetime. She pulled into the driveway. Gavin's Tesla was there, plugged in, sucking electricity from my house. She unlocked the front door. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Gavin, she called out. No answer. She walked into the living room. Empty. She walked into the kitchen. Empty. Then she heard a sound. A metallic scraping noise coming from the master bedroom. Her bedroom. She walked down the hall. The door was slightly ajar. She pushed it open. Gavin was there. He wasn't working on his business. He wasn't mourning his father-in-law. He was on his knees in the closet. He had pulled up the floorboards where Maya kept a small fireproof safe. It was where she kept her grandmother's jewelry and the emergency cash I had given her on her wedding day. Gavin had a screwdriver in one hand and a hammer in the other. He was pounding on the lock. He was sweating, grunting with effort. He looked like a wild animal trying to get at the marrow in a bone. He didn't hear her come in. He was too focused on the theft. "Damn it, open," he hissed, striking the safe again. "Open, you cheap piece of junk!" Maya stood in the doorway. The manila envelope in her hand felt heavy as lead. The man she loved, the visionary entrepreneur, was on his knees robbing his own wife because he had failed to rob her father. "Gavin," she said. Her voice was ice cold. Gavin jumped. He dropped the hammer. He spun around, his eyes wide with panic. "Babe," he stammered, scrambling to his feet. He tried to hide the screwdriver behind his back. I was just checking the structural integrity of the floor. I thought I heard a termite." It was such a stupid lie. It was an insult to her intelligence. Maya looked at the safe. The dial was smashed. The wood floor was splintered. She looked at Gavin, and for the first time, the love in her eyes was gone. It was replaced by the same steel I had seen in the mirror that morning. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just realized that her father was right. She wasn't looking at a husband. She was looking at a parasite, and the host had just woken up. Maya did not scream when she saw her husband trying to break into her floor safe. She didn't faint. She didn't run. She stood there in the doorway of the bedroom, clutching the manila envelope I had given her, and she watched the man she loved turn into a desperate animal. The silence in the room was heavy, broken only by the sound of Gavin's heavy breathing and the metallic click of the screwdriver he was trying to hide behind his back. I was not in the room yet. I was in the hallway, standing in the shadows, watching. I wanted to step in. I wanted to tear him apart right then and there. But I knew Maya needed to see this. She needed to see the mask fall off completely. She needed to see the monster underneath the tailored suit. Gavin scrambled to his feet. He looked wild. His hair was disheveled, sweat was dripping down his nose, and his eyes were darting around the room like a trapped rat looking for an exit. "Babe," he stammered, his voice pitching high with panic. "It is not what it looks like. I was testing the security. You know, with all the break-ins in the neighborhood lately, I just wanted to make sure your valuables were safe." It was such a pathetic lie. Maya walked into the room. She didn't look at him. She looked at the hole in the floor. She looked at the gouges in the wood where he had been hammering. "You broke the floorboards, Gavin," she said softly. "You destroyed the hardwood floors my father put in for us as a wedding gift." "Floors can be fixed," Gavin yelled, his composure cracking. "Why do you care about the floors? I am trying to save us. Save us from what Maya asked." She tossed the manila envelope onto the bed. It landed with a heavy thud. From Vinnie Santoro. The color drained from Gavin's face so fast I thought he was going to pass out. He stared at the envelope. He knew exactly what was inside. "Who told you that name?" he whispered. "My father," Maya said. "He knows everything, Gavin. The bankruptcy, the fraud, the $500,000 you owe to the mob. He knows about the loan sharks." Gavin didn't apologize. He didn't drop to his knees and beg for forgiveness. He laughed. It was a jagged, hysterical sound. "Your father," he spat. "That old interference. He thinks he is so smart. He thinks he can ruin me." Suddenly a sound echoed through the house. It wasn't a phone ringing. It wasn't a doorbell. It was a fist pounding on the front door. 3 heavy rhythmic knocks. Boom, boom, boom. The sound vibrated through the floorboards. Gavin froze. His eyes went to the window. A black SUV was parked on the curb. 2 men in dark suits were standing on the porch. They didn't look like guests. They looked like reapers. "They are here," Gavin whispered. He started to shake. "They found me. They know I am here." He spun around to face Maya. The fear in his eyes vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp desperation. He wasn't her husband anymore. He was a drowning man, and she was the only life vest in sight. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded document. It wasn't the deed to the warehouse. It was a quit-claim deed for the house they were standing in. The house that was in Maya's name because I had bought it for her. "Sign this," he commanded. What Maya took a step back. "Sign the house over to me." Now Gavin screamed. He lunged at her. He grabbed her wrist with his left hand and shoved the pen into her right hand. "If I have the title, I can get a collateral loan. I can pay them off." "Sign the paper, Maya." "You want to sell our home," Maya cried, trying to pull away. "Gavin, you are hurting me. I don't have a choice," he shouted. His face was inches from hers, twisted and ugly. Do you want me to die? Do you want them to break my legs? Sign the damn paper." "No," Maya yelled. She dropped the pen. That was the moment the mask didn't just slip. It shattered. Gavin grabbed a handful of Maya's hair. He yanked her head back. She screamed a sound of pure terror that cut straight to my soul. "You stupid woman," Gavin snarled, shaking her. "You don't get to say no, I am your husband. You do what I say. Pick up the pen." He raised his hand as if to strike her. That was enough. I didn't run into the room. I didn't shout. I simply made a sound that every man knows deep in his reptilian brain. Clack, clack. The unmistakable sound of a pump-action shotgun chambering around. Gavin froze. His hand hovered in the air. He slowly turned his head toward the corner of the bedroom. I was sitting in the high-backed armchair in the corner. I had been there the whole time, draped in the shadows. I was wearing my old flannel shirt. Across my lap lay my Remington 870. It wasn't a hunting weapon. It was a tool for home defense. The wood stock was worn smooth by my hands. The barrel was short black and very menacing. I had a cleaning rag in my hand. I slowly, methodically wiped the barrel. I didn't look at Gavin. I looked at the rag. You know, I said, my voice low and conversational, like we were discussing the weather. I haven't cleaned this since 1971, back in the jungle. Gavin let go of Maya's hair. She stumbled back, falling onto the bed, gasping for air. "Caleb," Gavin squeaked. His bravado evaporated instantly. He held his hands up. It is not what you think. We were just having a disagreement." I looked up. My eyes locked onto his. I didn't blink. "I wasn't a welder over there, Gavin," I continued, ignoring his stuttering. "I didn't tell you that part of the story. I wasn't fixing pipes. I was in a reconnaissance unit. I spent 3 days lying in a mud hole waiting for a target to cross a river. I learned a lot about patience, and I learned a lot about trajectory. I stood up. The shotgun didn't waver. The barrel was pointed directly at his chest. "You touched my daughter," I said. Gavin took a step back. He bumped into the dresser. "Dad, please. I am sorry. I was just stressed. Vinny is outside. He is going to kill me." I stepped into the light. "I don't care about Vinny," I said. "Vinny is a businessman. I can talk to Vinny. But you are a domestic abuser, and in my house we have a very strict policy about that." I raised the shotgun slightly. "You have 5 seconds to get out of my sight," I said. Gavin looked at the door. Then he looked back at me. But my car is blocked in. The SUV, one I counted. Caleb, be reasonable. I can't go out there. 2, I said. My finger moved to the trigger guard. Maya was staring at me. She had never seen this man before. She had never seen the soldier. She had only seen the father. But today, she needed the soldier. 3. Gavin looked at the gun. He looked at the pure, cold intent in my eyes. He realized that the threat outside was hypothetical, but the threat in this room was immediate and terminal. He scrambled. He didn't walk, he ran. He tripped over his own feet, crashing into the doorframe as he fled into the hallway. I heard him running down the stairs. I heard the front door slam open. I walked to the window. I watched him run past the black SUV. He didn't even get in his Tesla. He just ran down the street, sprinting like the coward he was, disappearing around the corner. The 2 men in the SUV watched him go. They didn't chase him. They looked up at the window. They saw me standing there, the shotgun resting on my shoulder. I nodded to them, just a small acknowledging nod. The driver nodded back. They started the engine and slowly drove away, following Gavin's path. They would find him. Men like that always get found. I turned back to the room. Maya was sitting on the edge of the bed, shaking uncontrollably. She was rubbing her scalp where he had grabbed her. I leaned the shotgun against the wall and sat next to her. I didn't say anything. I just wrapped my big, calloused arms around her. She buried her face in my chest and wept. She cried for the marriage that was a lie. She cried for the husband who didn't exist. She cried for the floors he had ruined and the trust he had shattered. I held her until the sun started to go down. "He is going to come back, isn't he?" she whispered eventually. I stroked her hair. "Not today, baby girl. Not today." But he will, I thought. He is too desperate not to. He will come back with a lawyer. He will come back with threats. He will try to sue me for brandishing a weapon. He will try to claim I threatened his life. Let him try. I looked at the shotgun in the corner. I had told him I was a sniper. That wasn't entirely true. I was a combat engineer. I built bridges and I blew them up. Gavin had just burned the last bridge he had. Now he was going to find out what it felt like to be on the other side of the explosion. I stood up. "Pack a bag, Maya," I said. "We aren't staying here tonight." "Where are we going?" she asked, wiping her eyes. "We are going to the warehouse," I said. "It is the safest place in the city, and besides, I think it is time you saw what I have really been working on all these years." I picked up the manila envelope from the bed. I put it in my pocket. The mask was off. The war was open, and I was ready to finish it. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and old lies. It is a smell I know well, not because I am a criminal, but because I spent years as a union rep for the pipeline workers. I know that justice isn't about truth, it is about who tells the best story. And today, Gavin Miller was telling a masterpiece of fiction. I sat at the defense table next to Rachel. I was wearing my charcoal suit, the one Gavin had mocked at the wedding. My hands were folded on the table, still and steady. Across the aisle, Gavin sat with his lawyer, a man named Mr. Sterling, who wore a suit that cost more than my first house. Gavin looked the part of the concerned victim. He had a bandage on his hand, a theatrical touch, considering I hadn't touched him, and he kept dabbing at his eyes with a tissue. Maya sat in the gallery behind me. She wasn't sitting with her husband. She was sitting directly behind me, her hand resting on the back of my chair. That small touch gave me more strength than any weapon I had ever held. The hearing was for an emergency guardianship order. Gavin was petitioning the court to declare me mentally incompetent and a danger to myself and others. He wanted full control of my person and, more importantly, my assets. Mr. Sterling stood up. He buttoned his jacket and walked toward the judge, a stern woman named Judge Patterson, who looked like she had no patience for nonsense. "Your Honor," Sterling began, his voice smooth as oil. "We are here today because of a tragedy. Caleb Robinson is a man who has worked hard his whole life. But age comes for us all, and in Mr. Robinson's case, it has come with a violent fury." He turned to point at me. "We have evidence that Mr. Robinson is suffering from advanced dementia. He hallucinates. He believes he is still fighting in a war that ended decades ago. Just 2 days ago, he threatened his son-in-law, my client, with a loaded shotgun. He held Mr. Miller hostage in his own home. He was raving about snipers and bridges. It was a terrifying ordeal for a young man who has done nothing but try to care for his ailing father-in-law." Gavin hung his head, looking appropriately traumatized. "Furthermore," Sterling continued, "Mr. Robinson is financially destitute. He squanders his meager pension on junk. He hoards scrap metal in a dilapidated warehouse in the industrial district. He refuses to sell this junk even when his family is in financial need. He is irrational, he is paranoid, and he is armed. We are asking the court to grant Mr. Miller immediate guardianship so he can place Mr. Robinson in a secure facility where he can get the help he desperately needs." Judge Patterson looked at me over her glasses. "Mr. Robinson," she said, "is it true you pulled a shotgun on Mr. Miller?" Rachel stood up before I could answer. She placed a hand on my shoulder. "Your Honor," Rachel said, her voice sharp and clear, "my client did brandish a weapon, but he did so to stop Mr. Miller from physically assaulting his daughter, Maya Robinson." "Objection," Sterling shouted. "Hearsay." "It is not hearsay if the victim is present," Rachel said calmly. She turned to the gallery. "Maya, please stand up." Maya stood. She looked tired, but her eyes were fierce. She looked at the judge. He pulled my hair. "Your Honor," Maya said, her voice trembling slightly, "he was trying to force me to sign over the deed to our house. My father saved me." Sterling waved his hand dismissively. "A domestic dispute is not the issue here. The issue is Mr. Robinson's mental state. He thinks he is a millionaire. He thinks that warehouse is Fort Knox. He is delusional." Sterling walked back to his table and picked up a document. "We have a financial statement here. Mr. Robinson lives on a pension of $2,000 a month. He has no savings. His only asset is a warehouse that has been condemned by the city twice in the last decade. My client, Mr. Miller, is a successful tech entrepreneur. He is willing to take on the financial burden of caring for this poor, confused man. He is a saint, Your Honor." I watched Gavin. He was trying to look humble, but I saw the corner of his mouth twitch. He thought he had won. He thought the poor old man narrative was unbeatable. Rachel leaned down to me. "Are you ready?" she whispered. I nodded. "Drop the hammer," I said. Rachel walked to the center of the room. She was holding a thick binder. She didn't look at Sterling. She looked directly at Gavin. "Mr. Sterling paints a very moving picture," Rachel said. a successful son-in-law caring for a broke senile father. But there are two problems with that story. First, Gavin Miller is not successful, he is insolvent. Sterling jumped up. Objection? Irrelevant. It goes to motive, Your Honor, Rachel shot back. If Mr. Miller is broke, his desire to control my client's assets becomes predatory, not charitable. Judge Patterson nodded. I will allow it. Rachel opened the binder. We have bank records showing Mr. Miller is $500,000 in debt to known loan sharks. We have evidence he tried to forge a deed to sell my client's warehouse just 3 nights ago. Gavin shifted in his seat. He looked nervous. But the second problem with Mr. Sterling's story, Rachel continued, her voice dropping to a hush, is the assumption that Caleb Robinson is broke. She turned to the judge. Your Honor, the plaintiff claims my client is hoarding junk in a worthless warehouse. He claims the property is a liability. He claims my client is delusional for protecting it. Rachel walked back to our table and picked up a large rolled-up map. She unrolled it on the evidence table. It was a geological survey map of the city dated 30 years ago. Mr. Robinson was a pipeline welder, Rachel said. But before that, he worked for a geological survey team in the 70s. He knows the land under this city better than anyone. She pointed to a red circle on the map. This is the location of the warehouse at 404 Industrial Way. On the surface, it is a rusty metal shed. But Mr. Miller was so busy looking at the rust, he forgot to look at the dirt. Gavin was staring at the map. He looked confused. 30 years ago, Rachel said, while laying pipeline in that sector, Mr. Robinson noticed an anomaly in the soil samples. He realized that the industrial district was sitting on top of a heavy concentration of monazite sand. The room was silent. Even the stenographer stopped typing. Monazite, Rachel explained, is the primary ore for neodymium and praseodymium, rare earth elements, essential for electric vehicles, wind turbines, and the very computers Mr. Miller claims to mine crypto with. She turned to look at Gavin. His face had gone gray. Mr. Robinson didn't buy that warehouse for storage, Rachel said. He bought the mineral rights to the land underneath it. He spent the last 3 decades quietly acquiring the adjacent lots through his holding company, Beatrice Holdings. He didn't extract it because the market wasn't ready. He waited. He held the line. Rachel picked up a piece of paper from the binder. This is a valuation report from the Department of Energy dated last week. They have been trying to buy the land from Mr. Robinson for 5 years. She handed the paper to the judge. Judge Patterson took the paper. She adjusted her glasses. She read the number. Her eyebrows shot up so high they almost touched her hairline. She looked at me. Then she looked at the paper again. Is this figure accurate? The judge asked. Yes, Your Honor, Rachel said. The estimated value of the rare earth deposit sitting under that worthless warehouse is not $300,000. Rachel paused. She let the silence stretch until it was screaming. It is $150 million. A collective gasp swept through the courtroom. It wasn't just a sound. It was a physical wave of shock. The bailiff's jaw dropped. Maya put her hand over her mouth, and Gavin Miller stopped breathing. He sat frozen, his eyes bulging out of his head. He looked like a man who had just been hit by a freight train. He had tried to sell it for $2 million. He had tried to sell a $150 million mine for the price of a condo. Rachel wasn't finished. So, Your Honor, she said, closing the binder with a snap, we have a man worth 9 figures who has successfully managed a massive corporate holding for 30 years without anyone knowing, and we have a man who is $500,000 in debt to the mob asking to take control of that fortune because he thinks the owner is confused. Rachel walked back to the table and sat down. I think the only person who is confused here, Rachel said softly, is Mr. Miller. I looked at Gavin. He was shaking. He wasn't shaking from fear anymore. He was shaking from the sheer crushing weight of his own stupidity. He looked at me. For the first time, he didn't see an old man. He saw a titan. Judge Patterson set the paper down. She took off her glasses. She looked at Mr. Sterling. Mr. Sterling, she said, her voice like ice. Do you have any other evidence to support your claim that Mr. Robinson is incompetent? Because from where I am sitting, he appears to be the most competent businessman in this room. Sterling was speechless. He stuttered. He looked at Gavin. He started packing his briefcase. Your Honor, I was not informed of these assets. Motion denied. Judge Patterson banged her gavel. It sounded like a gunshot. The petition for guardianship is dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, I am forwarding the transcript of this hearing to the district attorney's office. Attempted fraud and filing false legal motions are serious offenses. She looked at Gavin. Mr. Miller, I suggest you get a criminal lawyer. You are going to need one. Gavin slumped in his chair. He looked small. He looked broken. I stood up. I buttoned my jacket. I walked past Gavin's table on my way out. I stopped for just a second. I leaned down close to his ear. You wanted to know what was in the warehouse, Gavin, I whispered. Now you know. It wasn't junk. It was your future. And you just sold it for a lie. I walked out of the courtroom with Maya holding my arm. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what I was leaving behind. A pile of rubble in a tailored suit. But the story wasn't over. The court had cleared my name, but the warehouse was still waiting. And there was one more thing inside those walls that Gavin needed to see. The money was just the dirt. The real treasure was something he couldn't spend. We walked out into the sunlight. Where to now, Dad? Maya asked. To the warehouse, I said. It is time to open the doors, properly this time. The drive to the warehouse felt like a funeral procession, but I was the only one who knew we weren't visiting a grave. We were visiting a bank vault. Following the court hearing, the judge had ordered an immediate appraisal of the assets within Beatrice Holdings to finalize the dismissal of Gavin's guardianship petition and to establish the record for the fraud investigation. I rode in my truck with Maya. She was silent, staring out the window, her hands twisting in her lap. She was still processing the revelation from the courtroom that her father, the man she thought fixed leaky sinks for a living, was sitting on a mineral fortune worth more than the gross domestic product of some small countries. Gavin drove his Tesla behind us. He was followed by a court-appointed appraiser, a man named Mr. Henderson, who looked bored and annoyed to be dragged out to the industrial district on a Tuesday afternoon. Gavin probably thought he still had a chance. That is the thing about parasites. Even when you pull them off, they try to latch back on. He was probably calculating how he could talk his way back into Maya's good graces, how he could apologize just enough to get a slice of the pie. We pulled up to the gate. The sun was high and brutal, reflecting off the rusted corrugated metal of the warehouse exterior. To the naked eye, it looked abandoned. It looked like a place where dreams went to die. Gavin got out of his car. He adjusted his suit jacket, trying to regain some of the swagger he had lost in the courtroom. He looked at the building with a mixture of hunger and disdain. Well, he said, his voice tight, let's see the junk pile. Maybe there is enough scrap copper to pay for my legal fees. I didn't answer him. I walked to the small steel door next to the main roller gate. I pulled the chain from under my shirt. The iron key felt warm against my skin. Mr. Henderson, the appraiser, walked up with his clipboard. Mr. Robinson, whenever you are ready. I inserted the key. It turned with a smooth, heavy click. I punched a 6-digit code into the keypad hidden behind a false electrical panel. The heavy steel door hissed. Pneumatic seals released. I pushed the door open and stepped into the darkness. I could hear Gavin's footsteps behind me, impatient and shuffling. I walked to the main breaker panel on the wall. I flipped the master switch. There is a specific sound that high-intensity industrial lighting makes when it fires up. A low hum followed by a crackle of energy. Row by row, from the front of the warehouse to the back, the lights exploded into life. The darkness didn't just retreat, it was obliterated. Behind me, I heard a sharp intake of breath. It wasn't Maya. It was Gavin. The warehouse wasn't a dusty storage locker. It was a cathedral. The floor wasn't cracked concrete. It was polished epoxy, gleaming white and spotless enough to eat a meal off of. The air didn't smell of mildew. It smelled of high-octane racing fuel, conditioned leather, and the metallic tang of perfection. And in the center of the floor, arranged in a perfect V formation, sat the collection. 20 cars. But calling them cars is like calling the Mona Lisa a drawing. Closest to us was the 1967 Mustang Fastback I had mentioned before, its bullet green paint looking deep enough to drown in. Next to it was a 1955 Mercedes 300 SL Gullwing, its silver doors spread open like a bird taking flight. Further back, the aggressive red curve of a Ferrari 250 GTO, a car that by itself was worth more than every company Gavin had ever bankrupted combined. There was no dust. There was no rust. Every chrome bumper gleamed like a mirror. Every tire was dressed. Every windshield was flawless. I turned around. Gavin's mouth was open. He was blinking rapidly as if his brain couldn't reconcile the rusty exterior of the building with the multi-million-dollar showroom inside. Mr. Henderson, the appraiser, dropped his clipboard. It clattered loudly on the floor. "My God," Henderson whispered. Is that a genuine Shelby Daytona Coupe number 6 of only 6 ever made?" I said calmly. "I finished the restoration on the chassis 3 years ago." Gavin walked forward like a sleepwalker. He stumbled slightly. This is impossible," he stammered. You are a welder. You are broke." "I am a restoration artist, Gavin," I said. "People call me from Dubai, from Tokyo, from London. They send me their rusted legends and I bring them back to life. I don't do it for the money. I do it because I hate seeing good machinery treated with disrespect." I pointed to the back of the warehouse. Along the walls were rows of wooden crates, each stenciled with military serial numbers. "Those aren't car parts," I explained to the stunned group. "Those are vintage aviation components. P-51 Mustang propellers, Rolls-Royce Merlin engines. I supply the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum. I supply the Air Force Heritage Flight Team. When they need a part that hasn't been manufactured since 1945, they call Caleb Robinson." Maya walked past me. She reached out and touched the fender of the Mercedes. She looked at her reflection in the paint. "Dad," she whispered, "you did all this. Every bolt," I said, "every coat of paint, every stitch in the leather. But why hide it?" she asked, turning to me with tears in her eyes. "Why let everyone think you were struggling?" "Because real wealth doesn't need to shout, Maya," I said. "And because I wanted to know who loved me for me and who loved me for what I could give them." I looked at Gavin. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at the Ferrari. The shock was wearing off, replaced by a naked, terrifying greed. I could practically see the calculator running behind his eyes. He wasn't seeing history. He wasn't seeing art. He was seeing an auction block. He was seeing a way out of his debt. He was seeing a new life where he was the king. He forgot about the judge. He forgot about the restraining order. He forgot about the divorce that was surely coming. He started walking toward the centerpiece of the collection, the Shelby Cobra 427. It was blue with white racing stripes. It was aggressive, loud, and dangerous. It was my masterpiece. Gavin's hand reached out. His fingers were trembling. He looked like Gollum reaching for the ring. "I can sell this," he muttered almost to himself. "Just one of them. Just one would fix everything." Vinny would back off. I could capitalize the crypto farm. He was delirious. He got closer. His sweaty hand was inches from the pristine, hand-polished aluminum bodywork. I didn't move my feet. I just projected my voice. The voice I used to command crews on the oil rig. The voice that cut through the noise of heavy machinery. "Don't you dare," I said. Gavin froze. His hand hovered over the hood. He turned to look at me. His eyes were wild. "We are family, Caleb," he shouted, his voice echoing in the vast space. "Look at all this. You are sitting on a dragon's hoard. You can't keep this to yourself. It is selfish. I just need one." He turned back to the car. He was going to touch it. He was going to lay his clammy, greedy hand on the metal I had spent 5 years shaping. I took 3 long strides. I moved faster than a man of 73 should be able to move. I grabbed Gavin by the back of his expensive suit jacket. I yanked him backward. He flew. He lost his balance on the slick floor and went sprawling, sliding 10 feet away from the car. He scrambled to his feet, red-faced and panting. "You assaulted me!" he screamed. "Henderson, you saw that. He assaulted me again." Henderson picked up his clipboard. He looked at Gavin with pure disgust. "I saw a property owner protecting his assets from an unauthorized individual," Henderson said dryly. Gavin looked at Maya. "Babe, tell him we deserve this. We are his heirs." Maya looked at the cars. Then she looked at her husband. She looked at the man who had dragged her down, lied to her, and tried to rob her. "We aren't heirs, Gavin," she said coldly. "We are trespassers." Gavin turned back to me. He pointed a shaking finger at the Cobra. "It is just a car, Caleb. It is just metal and rubber. Why do you care more about a car than your own son-in-law?" I walked up to him. I stood toe to toe. I towered over him, not in height, but in presence. "It is not just a car," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "That car represents patience. It represents discipline. It represents respect for the past. 3 things you have never had in your entire life." I pointed to the door. "You wanted to touch it. You wanted to put your hands on my work." I leaned in close, so close he could smell the coffee on my breath. You aren't worthy to touch the dust on the tires of that car, boy. You are a vandal. You are a breaker. And this place is for builders. Get out." Gavin looked around. He looked at Henderson, who was busy taking photos of the engines. He looked at Maya, who had turned her back on him. He looked at the cars standing like silent sentinels of a quality he would never understand. He realized finally that he had lost. The treasure was right there within reach, but he was locked out by something stronger than steel doors. He was locked out by his own character. He turned and walked toward the exit. He didn't run this time. He dragged his feet. He looked small against the backdrop of the massive machines. As he reached the door, he stopped and looked back one last time. "You can't take it with you, Caleb," he spat. I smiled. "I don't have to," I said. "I am leaving it to someone who knows how to drive." I looked at Maya. She was standing by the Mustang, running her hand along the roofline. She looked at me and smiled. It was a sad smile, but it was real. Gavin walked out into the heat. The heavy steel door slammed shut behind him with a finality that rang like a church bell. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of oil and victory. "So, Mr. Henderson," I said, turning to the appraiser, "shall we start with the engines, or do you want to see the rare earth mineral analysis first?" Henderson clicked his pen. "Let's start with the Cobra, Mr. Robinson. And may I say, it is an honor to finally meet the ghost." I nodded. The legend was real. The mask was gone, and the warehouse was open for business. But only for those who knew the value of what lay inside. Most men have a limit to their shame. They reach a point where dignity kicks in, where they realize the game is lost, and they walk away to lick their wounds in private. But Gavin Miller was not most men. He was a creature of pure, unadulterated survival instinct. When I kicked him out of my warehouse, when I showed him the door and the millions of dollars he would never touch, he didn't leave. He broke. But he didn't break into anger. He broke into a performance. I watched him walk 10 paces toward his car, and then he stopped. His shoulders started to shake. He turned around. The arrogance was gone. The sneer was gone. In their place was a mask of tearful, desperate repentance. He walked back toward us, his hands clasped together like a penitent sinner approaching the altar. "Maya," he choked out. "Caleb, please, you have to listen to me." He didn't stop at the door. He dropped to his knees on the hot asphalt. He ruined his suit pants. He didn't care. He looked up at us, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the sweat and the grime of his earlier defeat. "I know how this looks," he sobbed. "I know I messed up. But you have to understand. I did it for us. I did it for the family." I stood there, arms crossed, leaning against the doorframe of my sanctuary. I looked down at him. I didn't feel pity. I felt the same cold detachment I feel when I look at a rusted bolt that needs to be cut off to save the machine. "For the family," I asked. My voice was flat. "Yes," Gavin cried, crawling a few inches closer. "I saw how you were living, Caleb. I saw the old truck. I saw the flannel shirts. I thought you were struggling. I wanted to take this burden off your shoulders. I wanted to develop the business. I wanted to turn this warehouse into a legacy that would take care of Maya and our children forever. I wasn't trying to steal it. I was trying to polish it." He looked at Maya. She was standing next to the Shelby Cobra, her arms wrapped around herself, watching him with empty eyes. "Babe," he pleaded, "you know me. You know my heart. I am a builder. I am a visionary. I just wanted to build an empire for you. I got desperate because the loan sharks were threatening me, and I was terrified they would hurt you. That is the only reason I forged the deed. I was trying to protect you. It was a masterful lie. If I hadn't known better, if I hadn't spent 40 years reading the stress fractures in metal and men, I might have believed him. He sold it well. The quivering lip, the wide, terrified eyes. Maya took a step forward. Her expression softened, just a fraction. It is hard to turn off love like a light switch even when you know the bulb is broken. "He sounds sincere, Dad," she whispered. Not to me, but to herself. Maybe he was just scared. I knew I had to end this. I couldn't let him worm his way back in. I couldn't let him use his fear as a weapon to disarm my daughter. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out my phone. "You say you respect me, Gavin," I asked. "You say you love Maya more than anything in the world." Gavin wept. "She is my life. And you? You are the father I never had." I unlocked my phone. I opened the app that controlled the hidden cameras in my house. I scrolled back to a file dated 3 days ago. The timestamp was 2 in the afternoon. Maya was at work. I was at the grocery store. Gavin was alone in the house on the phone with his mistress or maybe his bookie. It didn't matter who was on the other end. What mattered was what he said. I tapped the screen. I turned the volume all the way up. Gavin's voice blared from the phone speakers, tinny but unmistakable. It echoed off the steel walls of the warehouse, bouncing between the million-dollar cars. "Yeah, I am still stuck here." The recording played. Gavin's voice sounded bored, arrogant. "The princess is nagging me about her gallery again. God, she is so needy. I just need to get the deed from her dad." Gavin on his knees stopped crying instantly. His face went pale. The old man. The recording continued. "He is a joke. He is just a stupid, senile old N-word. He smells like grease and Old Spice. I can't wait to put him in a home and burn his trash. Once I get the power of attorney, I am dumping the daughter and taking the cash. I just have to play the loving husband for another week." The racial slur hung in the air like toxic smoke. He hadn't just called me old. He had used the word that men like him have used for centuries to strip men like me of our humanity. He had said it with such casual ease, such comfortable hatred. I stopped the recording. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush a tank. Gavin looked at Maya. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked like a fish gasping on a dock. Maya stared at him. The softness in her face evaporated. In its place, I saw a storm gathering. I saw the same fire that had helped her mother march for civil rights in the 60s. "You called him what she whispered." Gavin scrambled to his feet. "Babe, that is out of context. I was angry, I was venting. It is a deep fake. He used AI to make that." Maya walked toward him. She moved slowly, deliberately. She didn't look like a victim anymore. She looked like a queen who had just discovered treason in her court. "You called my father that word?" she asked, her voice rising. "The man who raised me, the man who paid for our wedding, the man who welcomed you into his home when you had nowhere to go." "Maya, please," Gavin stammered, backing away. "You said you were going to dump me," she continued, closing the distance. "You said I was needy, babe, no." Maya stopped. She was barely a foot away from him. She looked him up and down, seeing him for the first time without the rose-colored glasses of romance. She saw the sweat. She saw the cowardice. She saw the racism rotting his soul. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She pulled her arm back. The slap sounded like a pistol shot. It was a perfect kinetic transfer of energy. Her palm connected with his cheek with enough force to spin him around. It was the sound of 3 years of lies being shattered. It was the sound of a woman taking back her dignity. Gavin stumbled, clutching his face. A bright red handprint bloomed on his skin instantly. "Don't you ever speak to me again," Maya hissed. "And don't you ever, ever let me hear you say that word again." I stood by the door watching. I didn't smile. This wasn't a happy moment. It was a tragedy, but it was a necessary tragedy. The tumor had been cut out, but the surgery wasn't over. Rachel, my lawyer, stepped out from the shadows of the warehouse office. She had been standing there the whole time witnessing the spectacle. She was holding a blue folder. Rachel is a shark in heels. She walked up to Gavin, who was still holding his face, looking shell-shocked. "Mr. Miller," Rachel said coolly, "while you are down there on your knees, you might want to start praying. But not for forgiveness, for a good public defender." "What?" Gavin mumbled. "Who are you?" "I am the person who audited your finances," Rachel said. She opened the folder. "Specifically, the joint accounts you share with Maya." She pulled out a spreadsheet. "You claimed you used Maya's savings to invest in a crypto mining farm," Rachel said. "You told her the market crashed and the money was lost." Gavin's eyes darted left and right. That is what happened. The market is volatile." Rachel shook her head. "No, Gavin. The market didn't crash. You didn't invest a dime. We traced the transfers. $50,000 of Maya's money. The money she saved for a house. The money my client gave her." She held up the paper. "You transferred it directly to an online gambling site based in Malta. And the rest, you wired it to Vinny Santoro to pay off the interest on your loan." Maya gasped. "You gambled my money," she choked out. Rachel wasn't done. "That is grand larceny, Mr. Miller. But that is just the state charge." Suddenly tires screeched on the pavement outside. Gavin spun around. Two unmarked sedans pulled up blocking the gate. 4 men in windbreakers stepped out. They weren't patrol cops. They were serious men with badges on chains around their necks. "Economic Crimes Unit," one of them announced. I leaned against the doorframe and took a sip of my cold coffee. "You see, Gavin," I said softly, "when you cut off my credit cards back in Part 4, when you tried to strangle me financially, I didn't just sit there. I called the bank. I reported identity theft. I told them someone was accessing my accounts and trying to manipulate my credit." I pointed at the detectives walking toward him. "They have been tracking you for weeks. Every time you used my name, every time you tried to open a line of credit using my social security number, every time you forged a signature, it all went into a file." Gavin looked at the police. He looked at me. "You set me up," he whispered. "I didn't set you up, son," I said. "I just turned on the lights. You were the one stealing in the dark." The detectives grabbed him. They didn't be gentle. They spun him around and slammed him against the hood of the Tesla, the car he hadn't made a payment on in 3 months. "Gavin Miller, you are under arrest for credit card fraud, identity theft, and elder financial abuse," the detective read. Gavin struggled. He looked at Maya one last time. "Maya, tell them it was a misunderstanding. I am your husband?" Maya looked at him. She touched the cheek where she had slapped him. Her hand was stinging, but her eyes were dry. "I don't have a husband," she said. "I only have a father." She turned her back on him and walked toward me. They cuffed him. The click of the metal was the most satisfying sound I had heard in years. It sounded like closure. It sounded like the final bolt being tightened on a job well done. I watched them drag him to the squad car. He was screaming, blaming everyone but himself. He blamed me. He blamed the economy. He blamed the system. I put my arm around Maya. She buried her face in my shoulder. "I am sorry, Dad." She wept. "I am so sorry I brought him into our lives." I kissed the top of her head. "Don't be sorry," I said. "Be smart. You learned a lesson today that cost $50,000. Some people pay millions for that kind of education. You got off cheap." I looked at the warehouse. My cars were safe. My legacy was safe. My daughter was safe. Gavin looked out the window of the police car as it drove away. Our eyes met one last time. I didn't wave. I didn't gloat. I just stood there, a 73-year-old welder in a flannel shirt standing in front of an empire he could never touch. The kill shot hadn't been fired with a gun. It had been fired with the truth. And it was a direct hit. The silence that follows a siren is the loudest sound in the world. When the police cruisers finally disappeared around the corner, taking Gavin and his shouting and his lies with them, the warehouse fell deadly quiet. It was just me, Maya, and $20 million worth of vintage steel. But at that moment, the cars didn't matter. The money didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was the woman standing in the middle of the epoxy floor, wrapping her arms around herself as if she were freezing to death in the middle of a heat wave. Maya didn't just cry. She collapsed. It wasn't a theatrical faint like Gavin would have pulled. It was a slow, painful crumbling. Her knees gave out, and she sank to the floor right there next to the 1967 Mustang. She pulled her knees to her chest and buried her face in her hands, and the sound that came out of her broke my heart. It was a deep, guttural sob of pure shame. I stood there for a moment, letting her feel it. I learned a long time ago that you cannot rush grief and you cannot rush realization. She had to mourn the life she thought she had. She had to mourn the husband she thought she loved. I walked over to her. My heavy work boots echoed on the floor. I didn't say I told you so. I didn't lecture her about ignoring my warnings. I didn't ask her why she had let him treat me like a dog in my own house. I just sat down next to her on the floor. I leaned my back against the tire of the Mustang and stretched my legs out. I waited. "Dad." She choked out, her voice muffled by her hands. "I am so stupid. I am so incredibly stupid." "You are not stupid, Maya," I said softly. "You were in love. And love makes you blind. That is not a flaw, it is a feature. Predators like Gavin know that. They count on it." She looked up at me. Her mascara was running down her cheeks. Her eyes were red and swollen. I let him treat you like garbage, she whispered. I let him put you on an allowance. I let him talk about putting you in a home. I stood there and I let it happen because I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe he was the visionary he said he was. I wanted to believe I had made a good choice. She took a shaky breath. I chose him over you, Dad. I chose a con artist over the man who raised me. How can you even look at me? I reached out and took her hand. It was cold. I rubbed it between my two rough palms, trying to put some warmth back into her. I look at you and I see my daughter, I said. I see the little girl who used to hand me wrenches when I was fixing the lawnmower. I see the woman who became a pharmacist because she wanted to help people. Gavin didn't change who you are, Maya. He just put a cloud over the sun for a while. But clouds move. The sun stays. She shook her head. But I almost cost you everything. If he had sold this place, if he had found the deed. I smiled. It was a tired smile, but it was real. He was never going to find the deed, Maya, and he was never going to sell this place, because this place isn't just a warehouse. It is a vault, and I am the only one with the combination. I stood up. I groaned a little. My knees aren't what they used to be, and I held out a hand to her. Come with me, I said. There is something I want to show you. She wiped her eyes. Where, to see more cars? No, I said. The cars are just metal. They are beautiful and they are expensive, but they are just things. I want to show you why I really built this place. I led her past the rows of gleaming vehicles. We walked past the Shelby Cobra, past the Ferrari, past the crates of aircraft engines. We walked all the way to the back of the warehouse to a small, unassuming corner that was partitioned off with a glass wall. It looked like a small office or a laboratory. There was a heavy door with a digital lock. I punched in the code. The door hissed open. The air inside was different. It was cool, dry, and smelled faintly of old paper. A humidifier hummed softly in the corner. Walk in, I said. Maya stepped inside. She stopped dead in her tracks. The room wasn't filled with car parts. It wasn't filled with gold bars or stacks of cash. The walls were lined with custom-built display cabinets, the kind you see in high-end museums. They were lit with soft, UV-free LED lights to prevent fading. Inside the cabinets were papers, hundreds of them. Maya walked up to the first cabinet. Her eyes widened. It was a drawing, a crude crayon drawing of a stick figure man with a welding torch and a stick figure girl with pigtails holding hands. Underneath, in shaky, childish letters, it said, "Me and Daddy working." She moved to the next one, a spelling test from the second grade. A big red A+ was circled at the top. The next one, a Mother's Day card she had made for Beatrice when she was 10 with glued-on macaroni flowers. The next one, her acceptance letter to pharmacy school. Maya turned in a slow circle. The entire room was a shrine. It was a chronological archive of her entire life. Every birthday card, every drawing, every award, the program from her high school graduation, the dried corsage from her prom. She walked over to a large flat file cabinet in the center of the room. I opened a drawer. Inside, pressed between acid-free sheets, was the finger painting she had made when she was 3 years old. She put her hand to her mouth. A fresh wave of tears welled up in her eyes. "You kept it," she whispered. "You kept all of it." I looked at her. "Gavin thought I was hoarding cash in here," I said. "He thought I was hiding money from the government, but he was wrong. I don't use this fortress to protect my money, Maya. I use the money to protect this." I gestured to the room. "This is my wealth," I said. "This is what I worked for. When I was freezing on those pipelines in Alaska, when I was diving into black water to fix a leak, I wasn't thinking about Ferraris. I was thinking about that spelling test. I was thinking about that macaroni card." I walked over to her and stood in front of the cabinet holding her childhood drawing. "Gavin looked at the Shelby Cobra and saw a payday," I said. "I look at this drawing and I see the day you gave it to me. I remember you were wearing a yellow dress and you had chocolate ice cream on your chin. That memory is worth more to me than every car on that floor combined." Maya looked at me. The shame in her eyes was starting to fade, replaced by a profound sense of awe. "You built a climate-controlled vault for my finger paintings?" she asked, a small, watery smile touching her lips. I shrugged. It seemed like a good investment. Stocks go down, real estate crashes. "But this only gains value," she laughed. It was a wet, choked sound, but it was a laugh. I turned to face her. I put my hands on her shoulders. I need you to understand something, Maya. Money is just a tool. It is a hammer. You can use a hammer to build a house, or you can use it to break a window. Gavin tried to use it to break us, but I used it to build a wall around what matters. And what matters is you. I pointed to the door. Those cars out there. They are my retirement plan. They are my fun. But this room, this is my legacy. Maya threw her arms around me. She buried her face in my flannel shirt, smelling the oil and the old spice that Gavin had mocked. She held on tight like she was afraid I would disappear if she let go. I love you, Dad, she sobbed into my chest. I love you so much. And I am so sorry. I wrapped my arms around her. I rested my chin on the top of her head. I know, baby girl, I whispered. I know. We stood there for a long time in the quiet, cool air of the archive. Surrounded by the paper ghosts of her childhood, we finally put the real ghosts to rest. Gavin was gone. The lies were gone. The threat was gone. And as I held my daughter, I realized that I was the richest man in the world, not because of the rare earth minerals under the floor, and not because of the millions in the bank, but because the one thing I had built that truly mattered, my relationship with my daughter, had survived the fire. It had been tested, it had been bent, but it hadn't broken. Like good steel, the heat had only made it stronger. Let's go home, I said eventually. I think we have some floors to fix. Maya pulled back and wiped her face. She looked at the drawing of us holding hands one last time. Yeah, she said. Let's go home. But Dad. Yeah. Can we drive the Mustang? I smiled. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the keys. I tossed them to her. You drive, I said. I will navigate. She caught the keys. For the first time in months, her eyes looked bright. We walked out of the vault, leaving the past safely locked behind glass, and stepped out to start the engine of the future. The V8 roared to life, a sound of pure power and freedom. And as we drove out of the warehouse into the late afternoon sun, I knew that everything was going to be all right. We had cleaned house. Now it was time to live. Justice is a slow machine. I spent my life working with engines that run at thousands of revolutions per minute, pistons firing faster than the eye can see. But the legal system, it grinds. It moves with the glacial pace of tectonic plates shifting deep underground. But when those plates finally snap, the earthquake is absolute. It took 6 months for Gavin's case to move from arraignment to sentencing. In that time, the seasons changed, the leaves turned brown and fell, and the winter frost coated the windows of my warehouse. But inside our lives, the ice was finally melting. The day of the sentencing, the sky was a bruised purple color, heavy with impending snow. I wore my charcoal suit, the same one I wore to the first hearing, but this time I wore it with a different tie, a bright red one. Beatrice loved red. She said it was the color of life, the color of blood, the color of a heart beating against the odds. Maya drove us to the courthouse. She didn't drive the sensible sedan anymore. She drove the 1967 Mustang Fastback. She handled the heavy clutch and the non-assisted steering with a grace that surprised me. She looked comfortable behind the wheel of a legend. She looked like she belonged. We sat in the back row of the gallery. When the bailiffs brought Gavin in, I almost didn't recognize him. The swagger was gone. The arrogance that used to radiate off him like heat waves from asphalt had vanished. He had lost weight. His hair, usually gelled and coiffed, was limp and thinning. He wore an orange jumpsuit that hung off his frame like a shroud. He scanned the room, looking for a friendly face. He looked for his drinking buddies. He looked for the investors he claimed to know. He looked for the women he had impressed with his lies. There was no one. The benches were empty, except for us. He locked eyes with Maya. For a second, I saw a flicker of the old Gavin the manipulator trying to summon a look of sorrow to pull at her heartstrings. But Maya didn't flinch. She stared right through him as if he were made of glass. The judge was efficient. She read the charges list like she was reading a grocery list, but every item carried the weight of years. Grand larceny, identity theft, credit card fraud, elder abuse. Gavin's lawyer, a public defender who looked overworked and underpaid, tried to argue for leniency. He talked about Gavin's clean record, which was only clean because he had run away from his previous crimes in other states. He talked about Gavin's potential. The judge wasn't listening. She had seen the evidence. She had seen the forged deed. She had listened to the recording where he called me a racial slur and planned to dump my daughter. 5 years, she said. The gavel hit the wood block. That sound. It was better than any engine I ever tuned. It was the sound of a debt being paid. 5 years in a federal penitentiary. No parole for at least 3. Gavin didn't scream. He didn't cry. He just slumped. The fight went out of him like air from a punctured tire. As they led him away, the chains on his ankles clinking on the floor, he didn't look back at us. He knew there was nothing behind him anymore. He had burned the bridge, and now he had to swim in the cold water alone. We walked out of the courthouse into the falling snow. Maya took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the cold, clean air. "It is over," she said. "No," I corrected her, opening the car door. "The cleanup is over. Now the rebuilding begins. And rebuilding is expensive." A week later, I made a decision that shocked everyone except Rachel. I called an auction house in Monterey. I told them I wanted to consign a vehicle. Not just any vehicle. I offered them the Ferrari 250 GTO. When the appraisers arrived, they treated the car like a religious artifact. They wore white gloves. They spoke in hushed tones. They told me it was expected to set a record. They asked me if I was sure. They asked me how I could bear to part with such a masterpiece. I told them what I told Maya in the vault. It is just metal. The auction was held online. I didn't watch it. I sat in my kitchen drinking coffee, listening to jazz. Rachel called me when the hammer fell. $42 million. It was a number so large it didn't feel real. It felt like latitude and longitude coordinates. I didn't put the money in my bank account. I didn't buy a yacht. I didn't buy a mansion. I established the Beatrice Robinson Foundation. The mission statement was simple. We would find kids like me. Kids from the wrong side of the tracks. Kids with black skin and rough hands who were told by their teachers that they weren't smart enough for college. Kids who looked at a broken engine and saw a puzzle, not a mess. We set up a scholarship fund for trade schools. We partnered with the best mechanic programs in the country. We bought tools, good expensive Snap-on tools for every student who got accepted. But I didn't just write checks. I wanted to build something real. I cleared out a section of the warehouse. I moved the remaining cars closer together. I installed 10 welding stations. I installed hydraulic lifts. I turned my sanctuary into a school. Every Saturday I opened the doors, not to rich collectors, but to teenagers from the neighborhood. I taught them how to change oil. I taught them how to tune a carburetor. I taught them that grease under your fingernails is a badge of honor, not a mark of shame. And my best student, she wasn't a teenager. It was a Tuesday night. The students had gone home. The warehouse was quiet. Maya was walking around the shop floor sweeping up metal shavings. She had quit her job at the pharmacy. She was running the foundation now. She was the one organizing the scholarships, talking to the press, handling the money. She was brilliant at it. She protected that money with a fierceness that made me proud. But that night she looked restless. "Dad," she said, leaning on a broom. "Yeah." I was under the hood of the Mustang tightening a hose clamp. "I am tired of pushing paper," she said. "I want to know how it feels, what feels to make something, to fix something." I wiped my hands on a rag and stood up. I looked at her. She was wearing designer jeans and a silk blouse. "You are dressed for a board meeting, Maya," she shrugged. "So I can change." I smiled. "Go put on the coveralls, the blue ones in the locker, and grab the leather gloves." 10 minutes later she came back. The coveralls were 3 sizes too big. She looked like a kid playing dress-up, but her face was serious. I led her to the welding station. I picked up the TIG torch. "Welding isn't about fire," I told her. "It is about control. It is about breathing. You are taking 2 separate pieces of metal, 2 things that have nothing to do with each other, and you are melting them until they become one. If you do it right, the joint is stronger than the original metal. If you do it wrong, it cracks under pressure." I handed her the helmet. "Put this on. And whatever you do, don't look at the light without the glass. It will blind you." She pulled the helmet down. I could see her eyes through the dark lens, wide and attentive. I handed her the torch. "Hold it like a pen," I said. "Not too tight. Let it flow." I guided her hand. We struck the arc. The sound was a sharp hiss like bacon frying. The light was brilliant, a miniature star born right there on the workbench. "Make a puddle," I shouted over the noise. "Watch the metal turn to liquid. Now dip the rod. Dip, move, dip, move." She was shaking at first. The arc wandered. The bead was lumpy, but she didn't stop. She bit her lip in concentration. She found the rhythm. Dip, move, dip, move. I stepped back. I let go of her hand. She was doing it. She was welding. I watched the blue light dance on her visor. I watched the sparks cascade down onto her thick leather gloves. I thought about Gavin. I thought about the years we lost. I thought about the lies and the pain. It was all just slag now, impurities that we had burned away. What was left was this, the steel, the bond. Maya finished the weld. She let off the trigger. The gas hissed for a few seconds to cool the tungsten, and then silence returned to the warehouse. She flipped up her helmet. She was sweating. There was a smudge of soot on her nose. She looked beautiful. She looked down at the two pieces of scrap metal she had just joined together. It wasn't the prettiest weld in the world. It was a little crooked. It was a little uneven. But I reached out and tried to break it. I put all my strength into it. It didn't budge. "It is solid," I said. Maya smiled, a real smile, a smile that reached her eyes. "I did that," she whispered. "You did," I said. She looked at me. "Teach me more," she said. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was late. I was 73 years old. My back hurt, my eyes were tired, but I had never felt more awake. "Grab another piece of steel," I said. "We are just getting started." We stood there for hours, father and daughter, surrounded by millions of dollars of history, building something that money couldn't buy. We were fixing the world one bead of molten steel at a time. The order had been restored. The gate was locked. The family was safe. And for the first time in a long time, the future looked as bright as the arc of a welding torch in the dark. 1 year later, the mail arrived on a Tuesday. It was a crisp autumn afternoon, the kind of day where the air smells like wood smoke and dried leaves. I was in the warehouse teaching a group of teenagers how to rebuild a carburetor. My hands were covered in grease, and the sound of laughter echoed off the steel walls. Maya was in her office, the glass vault, organizing a fundraising gala for the foundation. Life had found a rhythm. It was a good rhythm, a loud, productive, honest rhythm. The mail carrier, a young man named David, who always admired the Mustang, handed me a stack of letters, mostly bills for the shop, a catalog for welding supplies, and then at the bottom of the stack, a plain white envelope. The return address was stamped in red ink, State Correctional Facility, inmate number 89402. I wiped my hands on a rag and walked out into the sunlight to open it. I didn't need to guess who it was from. There was only one person in that zip code who knew my name. I tore open the envelope. The paper was cheap and rough. The handwriting was scrawled desperate, lacking the flourishes and confidence of the forged signature he had tried to pass off a year ago. "Dear Caleb," it began. I almost stopped reading right there. The audacity of the man. After everything, he still tried to use my first name as if we were peers, as if we were friends. I kept reading. "I hope this letter finds you well. I hear the foundation is doing great things. I saw a segment about it on the news in the common room. Maya looks happy. That makes me glad." Lies. It made him sick with jealousy. "Look, Caleb, I am not going to beat around the bush. Prison is hard, harder than you can imagine. The food is inedible, the bed is concrete, but the worst part is the other inmates. I have run into some people who, well, let's just say I owe some protection fees. I need to buy some things from the commissary to keep the peace. Soap, ramen, stamps. It is not much. I know you hate me. I know I messed up. But I am asking you man to man for a small loan, just $500. Put it on my books. I swear when I get out I will pay you back with interest. I have a new business plan I'm working on. It is foolproof. Please, Caleb, for old time's sake, don't let me suffer in here. Best, Gavin." I folded the letter. I looked at the warehouse. I looked at the millions of dollars in cars. I looked at the students learning a trade that would feed their families for a lifetime. $500. It was the exact amount he owed the mob when this started. It was the exact amount he had stolen from Maya's savings account 10 times over. He hadn't changed. He hadn't learned. He was still the same grifter, just in a different uniform, looking for the next mark to bail him out of his own consequences. I could have thrown the letter away. I could have burned it with my welding torch. But that would have been too easy. Gavin needed one final lesson. He needed to understand that the bank of Caleb Robinson wasn't just closed. It had never existed for him. I walked to my truck. I drove to the local toy store. I walked down the aisles past the dolls and the board games until I found the construction section. And there it was, a plastic tool set for toddlers. Inside was a pair of bright yellow, chunky plastic bolt cutters. They were rounded safe and completely useless. They couldn't cut through warm butter, let alone a hardened steel chain. I bought them. Then I drove back to the warehouse. I went to the back office. I unlocked the safe, the real safe, the one Gavin had fantasized about cracking open. I opened the heavy steel door. Inside there was no cash. There were just the deeds to the land, the incorporation papers for the foundation, and a picture of Beatrice. I stood next to the open safe. I smiled. A big, wide, genuine smile. I had Maya take a picture of me. I printed the photo on high-quality, glossy paper. I found a sturdy cardboard box. I placed the yellow plastic bolt cutters inside. I placed the photo on top of them, and then I took a pen and wrote a note on the back of the photo. Dear Inmate 89402, I received your request for tools to help you survive. Since you seem to have trouble with locks and chains, I thought these might help you practice. They are about as effective as your business plans. As for the money, it is all tied up. We are investing in the future, and unfortunately, you are history. Don't drop the soap. Caleb. I sealed the box. I drove to the post office. I paid for express shipping. I wanted him to get it by Friday. I imagined the scene. Mail call in the cell block. Gavin's name being called. The other inmates watching as he receives a package. The hope rising in his chest. He thinks it is cigarettes. He thinks it is cash. He thinks the old man finally cracked. He tears open the box. And there, sitting on top of the packing peanuts, are a pair of Fisher-Price bolt cutters. The humiliation would be absolute. It would be a story the guards would tell for years. The con man who got conned by a toy. I walked out of the post office. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold, the color of a welding arc fading into the night. I climbed into my Ford F-150. I rolled down the windows. The air was cool. I turned the key. The engine roared to life, a familiar, comforting rumble. I reached for the radio dial and found the jazz station. John Coltrane's In a Sentimental Mood poured out of the speakers, smooth and melancholic and triumphant all at once. I put the truck in gear. I didn't drive fast. I didn't have anywhere to be. I wasn't running from anything and I wasn't chasing anything. I was just driving. I thought about Beatrice. I thought about the vase Gavin broke. I thought about the floor he ruined. And then I thought about Maya welding. I thought about the sparks flying. I thought about the legacy that was safe secured not by chains but by character. Gavin was in a cage of his own making. I was on the open road. I tapped the steering wheel to the rhythm of the saxophone. You wanted to break in, Gavin, I whispered to the wind. Well, I hope you enjoy the view from the outside. I drove toward the horizon, an old welder in an old truck with a smile on my face that money couldn't buy. The war was over, and the good guys won. The Silent King's lesson. True power doesn't roar, it waits. I spent a lifetime welding steel learning that the strongest joints are the ones you can't see on the surface. Gavin looked at me and saw a rusty old man. He didn't know that rust is just armor earned through time. Never judge a book by its cover and never judge a man by his work boots. You might be standing on a gold mine while laughing at the miner. Protect your legacy not just for the money, but for the dignity it buys when the wolves come knocking. Silence isn't weakness. It's the loudest warning you'll ever give. If you enjoyed this story of justice and resilience, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps us share more stories like Caleb's with the world. And tell me in the comments, have you ever been underestimated by someone who only saw the surface? I read every single comment. See you in the next story.